Beneath the quiet rhythm of waves and the slow breath of glaciers, there lies a world long forgotten. A world older than our histories, older than the rise of kingdoms, erased not by time alone, but by waters that rose and ice that sealed away memory. At the end of the last ice age, vast floods reshaped continents, swallowing coastlines, valleys, and the traces of early civilizations. Myths from every corner of the earth speak of that deluge, of survivors, of temples drowned, of cities buried where no sunlight reaches. Today, fragments remain, megaliths rising from the sea, craters hidden under Greenland's ice, strange maps that hint at knowledge far beyond their age. Scientists measure, date, and debate, yet the mysteries persist, resisting clear answers. Were these ruins the work of forgotten hands? Were these legends echoes of a world destroyed? Or are we staring into shadows, seeing shapes where none exist? This journey will not claim final truth. Instead, it invites you to walk slowly through deep time, to listen to the silence of stones, and to gaze beneath the ice at what may once have been. Welcome to 3 hours of the most terrifying pre-flood mysteries buried beneath ice. Chapter 1: The Younger Dryas Cataclysm. The story of the Younger Dryas begins not in human memory, but in the quiet registers of ice. In the frozen cores drilled deep into Greenland's glaciers, scientists uncovered a startling truth. Around 12,900 years ago, the Earth's climate shifted with breathtaking speed. Temperatures that had been warming steadily at the end of the last ice age collapsed into bitter cold once more. This sudden reversal, lasting more than a millennium, is what we now call the Younger Dryas. For early humans scattered across the continents, it was a catastrophe on a scale we can scarcely imagine. The land they had begun to settle, the animals they had hunted for generations, the rivers and valleys where they found sustenance, all were transformed in the space of a human lifetime. The world turned suddenly hostile, forests died back, glaciers advanced again. In the archaeological record, we see the quiet signs of upheaval, cultures thinning out, tool industries disappearing, bones of great beasts lying abandoned where once they roamed in vast herds. The megafauna that had defined the late Pleistocene, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, vanished. Many species were gone forever, their extinction eerily aligned with this cold reversal. Was it solely the hand of changing climate that silenced them? Or was it also the arrival of new hunters, pressing too hard against fragile populations already stressed by dwindling food and harsher conditions? The debate continues, but the timing is too sharp, too brutal to ignore. Something happened at the threshold of our world. Theories abound. One suggests a flood of meltwater from the retreating ice sheets, pouring into the North Atlantic and disrupting the delicate conveyor of ocean currents. If the Gulf Stream faltered, warmth would have failed to reach the northern latitudes, plunging Europe and North America back into glacial chill. The evidence of massive flood channels carved into the landscapes of North America supports this idea. Vast scoured valleys and coulees stretching for miles, as though an inland sea had been unleashed in a single moment. But another possibility lingers in the scientific imagination, that of a cosmic impact. In 2007, researchers proposed that a comet or asteroid may have shattered in the skies above North America, igniting wildfires and cloaking the Earth in debris. Beneath layers of ancient soil, they found what appeared to be microscopic diamonds, impact spherules, and traces of platinum, materials that often mark cosmic collisions. If such an impact occurred, it could have instantly triggered widespread destruction, collapsing ecosystems and darkening the sun. Yet not all accept this hypothesis. Critics argue the evidence is fragmentary, the patterns inconclusive. And so, the Younger Dryas remains an open wound in our understanding of prehistory, a sudden winter with no clear cause, a catastrophe that demands explanation but resists certainty. What makes this mystery more haunting is its echo in human myth. Across cultures, stories of a great flood or a sudden destruction reverberate. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of waters that drowned the world. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah builds his ark to survive a deluge sent from the heavens. The Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha, survivors of a flood sent by Zeus. Even among the Hopi, the Maya, and the Norse, tales of previous worlds destroyed by water or ice endure. Are these simply allegories of morality and renewal, or fragmented memories of a time when seas rose and ice returned, erasing entire homelands? The Clovis culture of North America offers one of the most striking archaeological puzzles connected to this age. Known for their elegant fluted spear points, the Clovis people thrived as skilled hunters around 13,000 years ago, yet their presence is fleeting. Almost as suddenly as they appear in the record, they vanish. For decades, archaeologists wondered why. Did the extinction of megafauna deprive them of their prey? Did climate collapse scatter their communities beyond recognition? Or were they victims of a disaster greater still, one that swept their very memory from the land? Sites such as Murray Springs in Arizona and Blackwater Draw in New Mexico reveal a final glimpse of their world. Mammoth bones, butchered and left unfinished, as though life was interrupted mid-hunt. Charcoal layers in sediments suggest immense fires, perhaps wildfires spanning continents. To stand at these excavations is to feel the silence of a people and an age extinguished, preserved only in the fragments of stone tools lying cold in the soil. And yet, while cultures vanished, others adapted. In the Fertile Crescent, just as the Younger Dryas waned, humans began to cultivate grains, tending the first fragile gardens that would give rise to agriculture. Some scholars wonder, was it desperation during the cold centuries that pushed humanity toward innovation? Did the hardships of a world undone by ice force the leap from hunting to farming, from wandering to settlement? If so, the Younger Dryas may not only have destroyed, but also given birth to civilization itself. There is a curious symmetry here, a cataclysm that seems both an ending and a beginning, a line drawn through human history, dividing what came before from what was to follow. To those who lived it, there must have been no comfort in this. Only the pressing cold, the hunger, the disappearance of animals they had known for generations. Yet from their struggle came the fragile seeds of new societies. When we look back through the lens of geology and myth, we sense the magnitude of what was lost. Entire coastlines that once held settlements are now beneath the sea, drowned by meltwaters that surged as the world thawed again. How many stories, how many names now rest beneath silt and tide? We may never know. The earth hides its past well, sealing it under ice, under ocean, under silence. The Younger Dryas stands as a reminder of nature's unpredictability, an epoch where the course of history bent sharply, perhaps without warning. Was it the heavens that delivered fire, or the earth itself releasing floods of unimaginable scale? Were human societies already fragile, or were they struck down in their prime? Science gives us fragments, but never the whole. And so, we stand before the mystery of this ancient cold snap, piecing together data from ice cores, craters, stone tools, and stories whispered in myth. Every discovery sharpens the outline, yet leaves the center obscured. Perhaps this is why the Younger Dryas lingers in our imagination, not as a solved puzzle, but as a threshold, a reminder that what we call history may only be the thin surface above deeper, forgotten worlds. From beneath the ice, from within the silence of vanished cultures, the question remains, what truly happened 12,000 years ago, when the world was plunged into sudden winter, and what echoes of that lost age still shape us today? Chapter 2. Greenland's Hidden Crater, Hiawatha. Under the ice beneath the vast, silent ice sheet of northwest Greenland lies a wound in the earth so immense, so ancient, that it remained hidden from human knowledge until only a few years ago. In 2018, a team of scientists revealed to the world that they had discovered something extraordinary. A massive impact crater, nearly 31 kilometers wide, buried beneath nearly a kilometer of ice. They named it the Hiawatha Crater, after the great river that flows nearby. It is easy to imagine Greenland as a land locked in stasis, frozen and unchanging. Yet this discovery shattered that illusion. For buried under the frozen expanse is evidence of a cataclysm, a cosmic strike of unimaginable force, an asteroid or comet that slammed into the Earth, leaving behind a scar large enough to rival some of the greatest craters known on our planet. But its age remains uncertain, and in that uncertainty lies a profound mystery. The Hiawatha Crater first came into view not through human eyes, but through the gaze of machines orbiting high above. In 2015, data from NASA's ice-penetrating radar, collected by the Operation Icebridge program, began to reveal strange contours hidden beneath the ice. A near-perfect circular depression, ringed with raised edges, emerged in the data. Scientists were cautious, for glacial landscapes can play tricks, carving valleys and basins that sometimes mimic the geometry of impact scars. Yet the more the data was studied, the clearer the pattern became. This was not the slow hand of glaciers, but the sudden blow of something far greater. 2 expeditions to the site gathered sediment from the river that flowed out from beneath the ice sheet. Within those grains, shocked quartz was discovered, tiny crystals deformed at the atomic level, a fingerprint of violent pressures that only asteroid impacts, nuclear detonations or other cosmic collisions can create. Iron fragments rich in nickel were also found, metallic whispers of an extraterrestrial visitor. The evidence mounted, piece by piece, until the story could no longer be denied. An object from the heavens had struck Greenland. The question then became, when? Some researchers argue that the impact is relatively young, perhaps as recent as 12,000 years ago. This date would place the event squarely within the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden and dramatic cooling at the end of the last ice age. The Younger Dryas is one of the greatest puzzles of climate history, a 1,000-year plunge back into glacial conditions, just as the world was beginning to warm. Its cause has long been debated. Was it a disruption in ocean currents? A meltwater flood that altered the circulation of the Atlantic? Or was it the shattering blow of an asteroid, striking the ice sheet and sending plumes of vaporized rock and ice high into the atmosphere, dimming the sun and plunging the Earth into cold? If the Hiawatha Crater is indeed from this time, it may have reshaped not just climates, but civilizations. Across North America, archaeologists have uncovered a boundary layer rich in carbon, nanodiamonds, and magnetic spherules, signs of widespread burning and cosmic material. Some have linked this to the mysterious decline of the Clovis culture, an early people once spread across the continent. Could the Greenland impact have been the spark, raining fire across continents, flooding valleys, and erasing the fragile beginnings of human settlement? Others disagree. To them, the evidence points to a far older event, perhaps millions of years in the past. The glacial ice above the crater appears to be undisturbed by the violence beneath it, suggesting that the impact long predates the current ice sheet. In this view, the crater is a fossil, a relic of some forgotten age, its memory entombed in ice long before humans walked the Earth. If this is true, the connection to the Younger Dryas collapses, and the mystery deepens further. When did the blow fall, and what scars did it leave upon the world? For now, the truth remains locked away, buried beneath ice nearly a kilometer thick. Only a full drilling expedition, boring deep into the frozen crust, might yield definitive answers. But such an undertaking would require immense resources, and the Greenland ice sheet, vast and fragile, resists such intrusions. So the crater sleeps, its secrets intact, a riddle set into the bones of the Earth. The scale of the impact, whenever it occurred, is staggering to contemplate. A crater 31 kilometers across implies a cosmic body more than a kilometer in diameter. Traveling at tens of kilometers per second, such an object would release energy equivalent to millions of nuclear bombs. The shockwave would flatten forests for hundreds of kilometers. The ice sheet, struck with such force, would collapse and surge, sending walls of meltwater roaring into the oceans. Dust and vapor would cloud the skies, cooling the world in darkness. The echoes of such a strike would ripple across centuries, altering the course of rivers, climates, and perhaps civilizations themselves. Across human memory, myths of fire from the sky endure. Ancient peoples spoke of world ages destroyed by floods, by flames, by celestial wrath. In the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the gods remake humanity after earlier creations are shattered by catastrophe. In Greek myth, Phaethon loses control of the chariot of the sun, plunging the world into fire and ruin before Zeus strikes him down. These are myths, not histories. Yet in their persistence we hear a faint resonance, as though deep time has left a trace upon human imagination. If a comet did strike Greenland at the dawn of civilization, might its memory survive in fragments of story, carried like embers through the long night of history? In modern times, the Hiawatha Crater joins a small but significant family of scars across the Earth, reminders that our planet's surface has been struck again and again. The Chicxulub crater in Mexico, 66 million years old, marks the asteroid impact that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. The Vredefort Dome in South Africa, 2 billion years old, is the largest confirmed crater on Earth. Each of these craters is more than a scar. It is a turning point in the story of life itself. To that lineage now belongs Greenland's hidden wound, half seen beneath the ice. Yet unlike Chicxulub or Vredefort, Hiawatha remains an enigma. Its story is incomplete. We know of the strike, but not its time, nor its consequences. It hangs suspended between epochs, perhaps a silent witness to forgotten ages, perhaps the very blow that cast the world into the Younger Dryas. We do not know, and perhaps that unknowing is what makes it so haunting. Today, satellites continue to map the crater's form, radar waves painting the buried circle with ever greater clarity. Scientists debate, journals fill with arguments and counter-arguments, and expeditions carry back grains of sand and shards of metal from beneath the ice. Yet the heart of the mystery, the moment of impact, the aftermath, the human cost, remains shrouded in the silence of Greenland's frozen expanse. We stand, then, at the threshold of two possibilities. Either the Hiawatha impact is a relic of a forgotten deep past, or it is a key to one of the most turbulent episodes of recent human prehistory. Either way, it is a reminder of how fragile our world is beneath the stars, and how much of our story remains unwritten, concealed in places we cannot easily reach. Beneath the ice, the crater waits, a wound in the Earth's flesh, a question in stone and silence. Whether it is 12,000 years old or 12 million, it tells us that the cosmos has touched us before and will touch us again. But for now, Hiawatha sleeps under the ice, sealed in cold darkness, its secrets guarded by time. And as we gaze at its hidden outline through the lens of radar and imagination, we are left to wonder, was this the blow that shattered an earlier chapter of human history, or merely one of countless forgotten catastrophes that shaped the world we inhabit today? Chapter 3. Doggerland. The Lost Land. Beneath the North Sea, beneath the restless tides of the North Sea, lies a forgotten world. Today, we know it only as Doggerland, a drowned landscape stretching between Britain and mainland Europe, long hidden beneath grey waves and shifting sands. For centuries, fishermen trawling these waters have brought up more than fish. Fragments of ancient tools, the bones of mammoths and reindeer, and even human remains. Each object tells us something profound, that where there is sea today, there was once land. And not just barren land, but a fertile plain that was once home to thriving communities. At the height of the last ice age, roughly 20,000 years ago, much of northern Europe was buried under vast glaciers. Sea levels were far lower than today, locked away in the frozen sheets of ice. The North Sea basin, now flooded, was then exposed, a sweeping plain of marshes, rivers, and forests. This was Doggerland, a land that stretched across what is now the English Channel and the North Sea, linking Britain to the continent. To those who walked its soil, it was not a mystery, but home. Archaeologists believe Doggerland was one of the richest hunting grounds of the Mesolithic era. Herds of reindeer and aurochs roamed its meadows, while elk and red deer moved through its forests. Rivers teemed with fish, and wetlands offered birds and reeds for food and craft. For the people of the Mesolithic, this land was a gift, a place of abundance where tools of flint were knapped, shelters built, and communities raised families. But Doggerland was not to endure. As the Ice Age ended, glaciers began to melt. Between 10,000 and 8,000 years ago, seas rose rapidly. The plain that had stretched so widely began to shrink. Its rivers swallowed, its forests turned into marsh. Archaeological reconstructions suggest that the highest parts, perhaps an island archipelago, remained habitable for centuries. Yet the waters kept advancing. The process was slow, perhaps imperceptible at first, but relentless. Villages moved inland, hunting grounds vanished, and the horizon itself seemed to shift as the ocean claimed more land each generation. By around 6,200 BCE, the majority of Doggerland was gone, drowned beneath waves that separated Britain from the rest of Europe. What had once been a fertile heartland became a seabed. The story does not end with the rising of the seas. Around 6,200 BCE, a sudden catastrophe may have delivered the final blow. Known as the Storegga Slide, a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway, sent tsunamis crashing across the North Sea. Waves may have surged inland for miles, flooding coasts already weakened by rising seas. For the last inhabitants of Doggerland, such a disaster could have been the moment when their world truly ended. What fragments we know of Doggerland come not from temples or cities, but from the bones and tools preserved in mud and sand. In the 1930s, a trawler dredged up a barbed antler point, carved by human hands some 12,000 years ago. Since then, countless fishing nets have pulled fragments of flint tools, spear points, and animal remains from the seabed. In 2015, Dutch researchers even recovered part of a human skull, dated to around 8,000 years ago, alongside bones of elk and aurochs. These discoveries remind us that Doggerland was not legend, but lived experience. Geological surveys have revealed the outlines of this lost land. Using seismic mapping, scientists traced ancient river systems buried beneath the seabed, once flowing across a plain larger than many modern European countries. The Humber, the Thames, and the Rhine all joined here in great channels, draining into what was then a single northern gulf. Where today only waves roll, there were once valleys, lakes, and forests filled with life. Doggerland has also become central to debates about memory and myth. Across cultures, stories of great floods linger. Could Doggerland's drowning have imprinted itself upon the people who fled its advancing seas? Did oral traditions preserve these memories, passing them down as the flood legends that surface in Mesopotamia, in the Bible, and in northern European lore? The scale of Doggerland's loss, an entire landscape erased within human memory, offers a haunting parallel to such myths. For the people of the Mesolithic, this was not an abstract geological event. It was the disappearance of home, of sacred spaces, of burial grounds, of pathways known by heart. The bones we find today are not relics of strangers, but of families whose lives were turned upside down by forces they could not stop. The waters came, and they had no choice but to retreat. Yet what of their stories? If memory survived, it may not have been preserved in writing, but in oral tradition. Fragments of tales of lands swallowed by the sea, of gods angered, or of a world remade. These are stories that may echo faintly in later myths of Northern Europe, though the truth remains veiled by time. The tragedy of Doggerland also resonates with modern concerns. We too live in an age of rising seas. Coastal communities face uncertain futures as the oceans encroach once again. Doggerland becomes more than a lost land. It is a mirror, showing us that human history has always been entwined with the rhythms of ice and water, with the fragility of the coastlines we call home. To reflect on Doggerland is to feel both awe and unease. Awe at the scale of the land that once was, and unease at how easily such a world can vanish. Beneath the waves of the North Sea lies a buried chapter of human history, vast and silent. Its fields turn to silt, its rivers to tidal currents. What might still rest there, waiting to be uncovered? Tools, dwellings, even traces of belief. We cannot yet say, and so the waves keep their secret. Trawlers bring us fragments, sonar outlines, rivers no longer flowing, and geologists sketch the contours of valleys now unseen. But Doggerland remains largely beyond reach, its memory drowned, its story unfinished. Somewhere beneath the grey waters, perhaps a hearth still lies intact, stones blackened with smoke from fires that burned thousands of years ago. Somewhere, perhaps, a child's toy carved in antler waits, untouched since the day its family fled the rising tide. These are the silent whispers of Doggerland, carried not in words, but in absence, in the weight of water that hides an entire world. The lost land beneath the North Sea invites us to wonder. What did its people think, watching their world dissolve? How many other Doggerlands lie hidden along the drowned continental shelves of the earth? And what fragments of their memory linger in our own stories of deluge, of gods, of rebirth? The North Sea conceals the answers, rolling endlessly above a vanished plain, leaving us with fragments, questions, and silence. Doggerland endures not in its presence, but in its absence, a reminder of worlds lost and of how fragile the shorelines of memory truly are. Chapter 4. Göbekli Tepe, the world's first temple. On the dry limestone plateau of southeastern Turkey, a hill rises from the earth. For centuries, local shepherds wandered its slopes, unaware that beneath their feet lay one of the most profound archaeological revelations of our age. The place is called Göbekli Tepe, the Belly Hill. It does not look extraordinary at first glance, yet beneath its dusty surface sleeps a story that pushes the origins of human civilization further back than scholars once dared imagine. In the mid-1990s, a team led by the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavations on the site. What they uncovered stunned the world. Beneath layers of soil were massive T-shaped stone pillars, some weighing more than 10 tons, arranged in circles. Carved upon their surfaces were reliefs of foxes, vultures, snakes, wild boars, lions, and abstract symbols that still defy interpretation. Radiocarbon dating revealed that Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BCE, nearly 12,000 years ago. This made it older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, older than the Great Pyramids by 7. In an instant, the neat timeline of human development, hunter-gatherers first, agriculture second, then cities and temples, was thrown into disarray. Before Göbekli Tepe, the prevailing narrative was clear. Humanity's first great structures were thought to emerge only after agriculture had secured stable food supplies. The surplus of grain, it was argued, allowed complex societies to build temples, invent writing, and organize religion. Yet here stood a vast ritual complex thousands of years older than the domestication of wheat or barley. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not farmers. They were hunter-gatherers, moving through the wilds of the Fertile Crescent. And yet they gathered here to raise monuments of astonishing scale and sophistication. The very pillars themselves embody mystery. Each is carved into a T-shape, some rising over 5 meters in height. Many are adorned with intricate reliefs, leaping predators, coiled serpents, vultures with outstretched wings. Some pillars feature stylized arms and hands, folded across the body, as though these monoliths were anthropomorphic guardians, silent stone beings watching over the rituals of early humanity. Between them lie altars, enclosures, and the remnants of feasts, suggesting that the site was a center of ceremony, not habitation. No hearths, houses, or ordinary domestic structures have been found. Göbekli Tepe was not a village. It was a sanctuary, but a sanctuary for what? Some archaeologists see it as the world's first temple, a place where scattered bands of hunter-gatherers converged seasonally to reaffirm shared beliefs. Others suggest it was an astronomical observatory, its circles aligned with stars or constellations. Still others see echoes of myth, a shrine to the dead, a place where the boundary between life and death was negotiated in ritual. The imagery of vultures consuming human bodies recalls practices of sky burial, in which corpses were left for birds to strip to the bone before the soul ascended. The mystery deepens when we consider the broader context of time. The date of Göbekli Tepe's construction coincides with the very end of the Younger Dryas, the sudden ice age that chilled the Earth between 10,900 and 9,600 BCE. Humanity then was emerging from an era of climatic turmoil, floods, extinctions, shifting landscapes. Was Göbekli Tepe built as a response to cosmic catastrophe, a monument to survival, or perhaps an attempt to commune with forces beyond human understanding? And then there is the greatest puzzle of all. Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. At some point, millennia after its creation, those who used the site carried vast quantities of soil and rubble to cover it, entombing the stone circles beneath layers of earth. This was not the work of erosion or accident. It was intentional, systematic. The site became a mound, its secrets hidden for 10,000 years. Why would a people who invested so much effort in constructing such a sacred complex then choose to bury it? Was it an act of reverence, preserving a holy place for the distant future? Or was it an act of fear, sealing away something they no longer wished to confront? Klaus Schmidt often spoke of Göbekli Tepe as a place where the seeds of civilization were first sown. In his view, the act of building such vast monuments required levels of cooperation, organization, and planning that no small band of foragers could achieve alone. To gather, quarry, and carve the massive stones, to transport them across the plateau, and to erect them upright required the coordinated labor of hundreds, perhaps thousands. Such efforts may have demanded more stable food sources, pushing humanity to begin cultivating wild grains in the nearby hills. If so, then religion or ritual may have been the spark that ignited agriculture, reversing the long-held assumption. It was not farming that built temples, but temples that made farming necessary. This flips the foundation of history. Civilization, then, did not rise from the soil of wheat fields, but from the shared human hunger for meaning, for communion with the sacred, for gathering together beneath stone pillars that reach toward the stars. The carvings themselves remain elusive in meaning, yet they pulse with symbolic force. Snakes entwine the surfaces of some pillars, symbols of danger, renewal, or the underworld. Foxes, cunning and swift, dance across the stone. Vultures hover above headless human figures, recalling rites of death and rebirth. And then there are the abstract signs, H-shaped symbols, circles, and patterns whose language we cannot yet decipher. Some researchers suggest these may encode cosmological knowledge, constellations, or even proto-writing. Others see them as echoes of shamanic visions, etched from altered states of consciousness. In 2017, a team of researchers proposed that the carvings on one pillar, the so-called vulture stone, depict a comet strike remembered in myth, perhaps even the very impact theorized to have triggered the Younger Dryas. If true, this would mean that Göbekli Tepe was both temple and archive, a place where memory of catastrophe was inscribed into stone. Yet this theory remains contested, balanced between tantalizing possibility and speculative reach. The enigma of Göbekli Tepe reaches beyond archaeology into the realm of myth. Some have asked, could its builders have been heirs of a lost civilization, survivors of a pre-flood culture whose knowledge carried them through the chaos of the last ice age? Plato's tale of Atlantis, preserved by the Greeks, speaks of a mighty civilization destroyed in floods around this same epoch. Mesopotamian myths recount earlier worlds drowned by deluge. The Bible tells of a flood that erased all but a remnant. Might Göbekli Tepe stand as a stone testament to a world remembered dimly in these stories? Mainstream archaeology cautions against such leaps, reminding us that hunter-gatherers were capable of far greater feats than previously acknowledged. But even within that framework, Göbekli Tepe remains astonishing, for here we see people with no pottery, no metal, no wheels, yet carving and raising monoliths that would challenge us even with modern equipment. What perhaps moves us most is not only the scale of the site, but its silence. The builders left no written records. Their names are lost, their language is forgotten. All that remains are the stones, standing in circles, carved with animals that once roamed the hills, buried in deliberate secrecy. They whisper across 12,000 years, yet their message is blurred by time. When Klaus Schmidt passed away in 2014, he left behind not only a partially uncovered site, but also a vision that Göbekli Tepe was not a marginal anomaly, but the opening chapter of a hidden story of civilization. Excavations continue, yet less than 10% of the site has been revealed. Beneath the earth, more enclosures, more pillars, more symbols may still sleep, waiting for their turn to step into the light. Göbekli Tepe challenges us to rethink what it means to be human. It tells us that long before cities and kings, before ploughs and scribes, our ancestors gathered to build places of the sacred, that they carried in their minds and hands not only tools for survival, but visions of worlds beyond. It reminds us that the hunger for meaning, the impulse to carve the invisible into stone, may be as ancient as humanity itself. And yet, for all it reveals, Göbekli Tepe conceals even more. Its true purpose remains veiled. Was it a sanctuary of hunters, a gathering of shamans, a record of cosmic catastrophe, or the last memory of a lost world? We cannot know. What we do know is that 12,000 years ago, hands like ours raised pillars toward the sky, carved symbols into stone, and then, for reasons we cannot fathom, buried them in silence. And so, Göbekli Tepe stands today as both revelation and riddle, a place where history and myth blur into one, where the first sparks of civilization flicker in the shadow of stone. As the sun sets over the plateau, the pillars cast long shadows across the earth, as though pointing not only to the past, but to the mysteries that still lie ahead. Chapter 5. The Black Sea Deluge. Hypothesis. The Black Sea lies quiet today, its surface shimmering in tones of silver and blue, yet beneath its waters rests a mystery that continues to stir debate among geologists, archaeologists, and historians alike. To look across its wide expanse is to see only the present, but to peer below its depths is to confront a question as old as memory itself. Could this sea be the stage on which one of humanity's greatest flood stories was first born? In the late 1990s, marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed a startling hypothesis. They suggested that the Black Sea, far from being the saltwater basin we know today, was once a vast freshwater lake, fed by rivers flowing from the north. Its shores may have been fertile and inviting, attracting early Neolithic communities to settle and farm. But then, around 5600 BCE, something happened. According to their model, Mediterranean waters, driven by a rising global sea level at the end of the Ice Age, broke through the natural dam of the Bosporus Strait. What followed, they argued, was not a gentle rising of water, but a catastrophic flood. Mediterranean seawater surging into the basin with a force difficult to fathom. The evidence they offered was compelling. Sediment cores taken from the seabed revealed abrupt changes in the layers. Freshwater shells, thousands of years old, were suddenly overlaid by saltwater species. The transition was sharp, suggesting that this was not a slow encroachment, but a dramatic shift in environment. Geological modeling implied that as much as 50 cubic kilometers of water could have rushed in each day, raising the sea level of the basin rapidly, perhaps several feet in a single season. For those who lived along its shores, it would have seemed as though the sea had devoured the land overnight. Archaeological discoveries along the Black Sea's margins added to the intrigue. In the early 2000s, explorer Robert Ballard, famous for discovering the wreck of the Titanic, turned his attention to these waters. His team reported evidence of ancient shorelines more than 100 meters below the current surface, along with remnants of what appeared to be wooden structures buried in the silt. While these findings remain debated and fragmentary, they suggest that human settlements may indeed have been drowned by the sea's sudden expansion. The hypothesis gained further weight when compared with ancient myth. The biblical story of Noah's flood, the Mesopotamian tale of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and other flood legends from Anatolia and the Near East all describe sudden and overwhelming deluges. Could these stories preserve cultural memories of a real event, the drowning of a fertile plain beneath the Black Sea? For Ryan and Pittman, the parallels were striking. They saw in these myths not allegory alone, but echoes of a catastrophe retold across generations. Yet, as with so many questions of deep antiquity, consensus remains elusive. Some geologists argue that the flood may not have been catastrophic at all, but rather a slower, gradual transgression of the sea over centuries. Others suggest that the dating of the event is uncertain, or that the changes in sediment could be explained by other processes. Still others caution against drawing direct connections between geological events and myth, reminding us that flood stories appear in cultures far removed from the Black Sea, perhaps arising independently from local experiences of rivers overflowing or coastal storms. Despite the skepticism, the vision of a world erased beneath water continues to captivate. Imagine the scene: villages clustered near rivers, herders guiding animals through meadows, families tending early fields of wheat and barley. Then suddenly the horizon shifts. The waters rise, season after season, taking fields, homes, and burial grounds with them. Generations might remember not the science of what happened, but the terror of it, the feeling of a land betrayed, of gods angered, of life itself overturned. There is also the enigma of what remains hidden. Much of the Black Sea floor is anoxic, its deeper waters deprived of oxygen, which slows the decay of organic material. This unique condition offers a possibility tantalizing to archaeologists, that settlements, tools, even wooden structures may be preserved beneath the silt, waiting for discovery. If excavated, they could reveal an entire chapter of early human society erased by the flood, preserved in a kind of suspended animation beneath the waves. The Black Sea deluge hypothesis remains, therefore, less a solved puzzle than an open doorway. It draws together strands of geology, archaeology, and myth, weaving them into a story of water and loss. Whether the flood was sudden or gradual, whether it truly inspired the biblical narrative or not, the image it conjures is unforgettable, of a people watching the sea advance, powerless to resist, forced to abandon the land they had shaped and the graves of their ancestors. In reflecting on this story, one senses both the fragility and resilience of human life. Fragility, because entire worlds can vanish beneath water, leaving only faint echoes in sediment and song. Resilience, because the memory endures, carried across generations until it finds its way into scripture, epic and legend. The waters took the land, but the people carried the story forward, reshaping it into the timeless warning of a flood sent from the heavens. And so, when we gaze across the Black Sea today, we may see only waves and wind. Yet beneath lies the shadow of another world, its villages drowned, its fields erased. Was this the true birthplace of the flood myths that shaped civilizations? Or is it but one among many deluges remembered dimly in human lore? The answers remain submerged, held in silence by the deep, waiting for the day when science, and perhaps fortune, uncovers more of what the sea has hidden. Chapter 6: Lake Vostok, a hidden Antarctic world. In the frozen heart of Antarctica, beneath 4 kilometers of unbroken ice, lies a world that has been sealed away for millions of years. It is a place untouched by wind, rain, or sunlight. A place where life, if it exists, has endured in perfect isolation, preserved beneath the crushing silence of the polar cap. This is Lake Vostok, one of Earth's most secret chambers, a hidden world suspended between geology, biology, and myth. For much of human history, Antarctica itself was a blank space on the map, a land of conjecture. Philosophers in ancient Greece spoke of a terra australis, an unknown southern continent balancing the known world. Yet it was not until the 20th century, when satellites began to scan beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, that the true extent of its buried landscapes was revealed. Beneath the white desert, scientists found mountains, valleys, and lakes, relics of an older Earth entombed beneath the ice. Among these, none was more extraordinary than Lake Vostok. Lake Vostok stretches for 250 kilometers in length and up to 50 kilometers in width, a body of water as large as Lake Ontario. It lies beneath 4 kilometers of ice, trapped in darkness for at least 15 million years, perhaps longer. Despite this, the lake remains liquid, kept from freezing by heat rising from Earth's interior and by the immense pressure of the overlying ice. This makes it a time capsule, a sealed environment whose isolation rivals that of other worlds in our solar system. For astrobiologists, Vostok is not just a lake, it is an analogue for Europa or Enceladus, icy moons where oceans may lurk beneath frozen crusts. But for those drawn to Earth's hidden mysteries, Lake Vostok is something more. A vault, a place where the past may still linger, untouched, waiting to be discovered. The first hints of Vostok's existence came in the 1950s, when seismic surveys suggested a vast body of liquid beneath the Antarctic ice. Yet it was only in the 1990s, through satellite radar mapping, that its true scale was understood. Beneath the ice sheet, the contours of a massive subglacial lake became clear, sending waves of excitement through the scientific community. The challenge, however, was access. To drill into a body of water so perfectly sealed for millions of years risked contamination, both of the lake itself and of the surface world. For decades, the lake remained untouched, scientists debating how, or whether, to pierce its icy shell. The Russians, operating from the remote Vostok station, were the first to attempt it. Using specialized drills, they bored slowly downward through nearly 4 kilometers of ice. In 2012, after years of effort, the drill broke through. For the first time in human history, the sealed waters of Lake Vostok were breached. What they found only deepened the mystery. Samples taken from refrozen lake water revealed unusual microbes, genetic sequences unlike any known species. Some belonged to familiar groups of bacteria, but others were entirely novel, suggesting that the lake hosts ecosystems that evolved in complete isolation. Critics cautioned that contamination from the drilling process could not be ruled out. Yet the possibility remained that beneath the Antarctic ice, a hidden biosphere endures, untouched by the outside world for millions of years. The implications are profound. If life can persist in the crushing darkness of Vostok, cut off from sunlight, locked beneath kilometers of ice, then perhaps life is more resilient, more adaptable than we have imagined. Perhaps it thrives in the oceans beneath Europa's ice shell or in the subsurface seas of Enceladus. But beyond the scientific promise lies a more mythic speculation. What else might have been preserved there? Some voices whisper that lakes like Vostok could contain remnants of pre-flood ecosystems, sealed away when the ice descended upon Antarctica. Ancient forests once thrived on this continent. Fossilized trees and the remains of warm climate animals tell us that Antarctica was not always a frozen desert. Could traces of that lost world survive in Vostok's waters? Pollen, microbes, even genetic echoes of vanished species. Others venture further still. They wonder whether human presence, so far back in prehistory that it lies beyond the accepted record, might somehow be hidden beneath the Antarctic ice. Maps from the early modern period, such as the controversial Piri Reis map, seem to depict Antarctica centuries before its official discovery, and in some interpretations, even portray it without its ice. Could such fragments point to a forgotten knowledge, memories of a time when Antarctica was not a wasteland, but a habitable land? These are speculations, far from proven, but they persist, fueled by the enigmatic silence of places like Lake Vostok. What fascinates archaeologists and explorers alike is not only what has been found, but what remains concealed. Less than a fraction of the lake's waters have been sampled. No robot has yet swum through its darkness. No camera has yet revealed the contours of its hidden shores. The microbes discovered so far may be only the faintest shadows of a far richer ecosystem below. Entire species may lie waiting, unseen, in a world as alien as any beyond the Earth. And there is the matter of secrecy. Some researchers have suggested that the results from Vostok are released sparingly, filtered through layers of caution. In a world where national interests compete even at the poles, the lake has become not just a scientific treasure, but a geopolitical one. Rumors circulate that more exotic discoveries have been made beneath the ice: fossils, artifacts, anomalies, though official reports insist on microbial life alone. In the absence of transparency, imagination fills the void. Lake Vostok is not alone. Across Antarctica, more than 400 subglacial lakes have been identified, each sealed away for countless ages. Vostok is the largest, but it is only the beginning. Together, they suggest that beneath Antarctica's frozen surface lies an entire hidden hydrological world. Rivers flowing under the ice, lakes pooling in darkness, ecosystems sealed from the sun since before humanity's rise. It is a reminder that the Earth itself is layered with worlds we do not yet know. The paradox of Vostok is that it is both known and unknown. We can measure its length and depth, chart its outline with radar, drill into its waters. And yet what it truly contains remains elusive. Every answer seems to multiply the questions. How did life endure here? What does it look like deep beneath the ice? Has the lake been truly isolated? Or do hidden channels connect it with other worlds below? And above all, what, if anything, lies waiting in its silence? For now, Lake Vostok remains sealed once again, its waters sampled only at the margins. The drilling has paused, and the world beneath 4 kilometers of ice returns to its timeless state. Yet the idea of it lingers in our imagination, a place at once earthly and otherworldly, where the past may still breathe, where forgotten ecosystems or echoes of older worlds may endure. It is a reminder that Earth still holds secrets beyond our grasp, chambers locked away not in myth, but in ice, waiting for us to approach with reverence, with caution, with awe. Beneath the Antarctic night, beneath the grinding silence of the glaciers, Lake Vostok waits, a hidden world, a mirror of distant moons, and perhaps a vault of forgotten histories still sealed against the passage of time. Chapter 7. The Buried Ruins of Yonaguni. Japan beneath the restless waters of the Pacific Ocean, off the southern tip of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, lies one of the most enigmatic discoveries of the 20th century. Divers descending near Yonaguni Island in 1986 first encountered the structure, massive, angular, and strangely deliberate. What they saw did not resemble the irregular, scattered shapes of natural seabed geology. Instead, they found vast terraces, sharp-edged platforms, and steps that looked as though they had been carved by human hands. It was a sight that seemed to blur the boundary between natural formation and ancient architecture, between geology and archaeology, between what we know and what we are willing to imagine. The Yonaguni Monument, as it came to be known, stretches across a remarkable area. At nearly 150 meters in length and rising up to 25 meters from the seafloor, its scale alone captures the imagination. Divers report broad terraces that could be mistaken for plazas, stairways that rise in tight succession, and walls that appear to have been chiseled with symmetry. Some even describe what looks like the remnants of a roadway, and a massive rectangular feature that evokes the image of a ceremonial stage or altar. To swim among these forms is to drift between the familiar lines of human construction and the alien vastness of an underwater labyrinth. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura became one of the most prominent advocates for the site's artificial origin. For decades, he studied Yonaguni, surveying its steps, platforms, and what he interpreted as tool marks etched into the stone. Kimura argued that the monument was once part of a larger settlement, perhaps even a city, submerged around 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, when rising seas swallowed coastlines across the globe. If true, this would not merely add a forgotten chapter to Japanese history, it would rewrite the timeline of advanced human construction, pushing it back thousands of years earlier than conventional archaeology accepts. Skeptics, however, see the matter differently. Many geologists argue that Yonaguni's features can be explained by natural processes. The region's sandstone, they note, tends to fracture along straight lines, breaking into geometric blocks when subjected to tectonic stress and oceanic erosion. In this view, the steps, terraces, and angular walls are the products of geology rather than the handiwork of an ancient culture. For critics, the temptation to interpret natural shapes as artificial is strong, but ultimately misleading, a reminder of humanity's tendency to see patterns where none were intended. The debate between these two positions, natural versus man-made, remains unresolved, in part because Yonaguni is still so little explored. The currents around the island are notoriously strong, making dives dangerous and limiting extended investigation. Archaeological excavation beneath the sea is also a formidable challenge, requiring specialized equipment and enormous resources. As a result, much of the monument remains a mystery, glimpsed only through divers' accounts, underwater photographs, and brief surveys. What fuels the fascination, however, is not only the structure's form, but its context. If Yonaguni were proven artificial, it would stand as one of the oldest monumental constructions on Earth. Its age would predate the pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, and the stone circles of Britain. It would suggest that a culture capable of shaping massive stone platforms once thrived on the coastlines of ancient Japan, only to be erased when the seas rose at the end of the Pleistocene. Such a revelation would align Yonaguni with other global enigmas: the drowned landscapes of Doggerland, the submerged ruins claimed off India's Gulf of Cambay, and the flood myths carried in oral traditions from Mesopotamia to Polynesia. The mythic echoes in Japan itself deepen the intrigue. Local legends tell of kingdoms lost to the sea and of civilizations that once flourished before vanishing beneath the waves. While such stories cannot serve as proof, they cast a shadow of cultural memory across the debate. Were the people of Yonaguni recalling something their ancestors witnessed? Coastlines swallowed, temples drowned, lives uprooted? Or are these tales, like the monument itself, simply natural forms shaped by the tides of imagination? Divers who descend into Yonaguni often describe the experience in reverent tones. To swim through its corridors is to feel both awe and unease, as though trespassing in a place half-built, half-born. The stillness of the submerged terraces, the silence of the stone stairways, invites reflection. If this was once a place of ceremony, then voices may have echoed here long before written history, chants, prayers, or songs now muted by the sea. If natural, then its very geometry is a reminder that the earth itself is a master architect, capable of designs so uncanny they mirror the works of human hands. Scientific certainty may never fully resolve the mystery. Evidence in favor of artificial construction remains tantalizing but inconclusive. Geological explanations remain persuasive yet incomplete. What persists, then, is the liminal quality of Yonaguni, the way it hovers between categories, resisting final judgment. This ambiguity may, in the end, be the heart of its power. For whether natural wonder or human ruin, Yonaguni tells a story of time's immensity, of worlds forgotten, and of the ocean's role as both cradle and tomb of civilizations. As we look at Yonaguni, we are reminded that the sea hides as much as it reveals. The questions linger. Was there once a culture here, building terraces and platforms on the edge of the Pacific? Did rising seas erase their work, consigning their memory to myth? Or are we simply gazing upon the artistry of the earth itself, sculpted not by chisel but by fault lines and tides? The waters keep their counsel. The monument endures in silence, a stone riddle beneath the waves, drawing us back again and again to its submerged enigma. Chapter 8. Atlantis in Plato's Dialogues. In the middle of the 4th century BCE, the philosopher Plato set down a story that has haunted human imagination for more than 2,000 years. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he described a mighty island civilization, a great naval power beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis, he wrote, was a land of extraordinary wealth, fertile plains, concentric harbours, and temples gleaming with orichalcum, a legendary metal said to shine like fire. It was a society advanced in governance, engineering, and art, a kingdom favoured by the gods. And then, in a single terrible day and night, Atlantis was destroyed. Earthquakes shook the land, floods rose from the sea, and the island sank beneath the waves. Its glory was lost forever, leaving only fragments of memory carried forward in story. For many, Plato's account is allegory, a parable about hubris and decline. Yet buried within his words are details, dates, measures, descriptions of land and climate that continue to unsettle scholars. Could it be that Plato was not only telling a moral tale, but preserving a distant memory of catastrophe at the dawn of civilization? Plato begins his account by invoking a source. The story of Atlantis, he says, comes not from Greece itself, but from Egypt. Solon, one of Athens' wise lawgivers, travelled to the Nile some centuries earlier. There, priests of the temple at Sais recounted to him an ancient tale preserved in their records. The Greeks, they told him, remembered only a single flood, the flood of Deucalion. But in truth, many destructions had come before, and one of the greatest was the sinking of Atlantis. The priests dated the catastrophe to 9,000 years before Solon, that is, around 9600 BCE, at the very edge of the last ice age. In that epoch, they said, Athens itself had been a strong city, contending with the Atlanteans and resisting their attempt at conquest. Only later, after catastrophe, was its memory forgotten, leaving the faint beginnings of history that Plato knew. This dating, 9600 BCE, is not vague mythology. It is startlingly precise, and it aligns uncannily with what modern science recognizes as a time of violent upheaval. The end of the Younger Dryas. When the Earth warmed abruptly, ice sheets collapsed and sea levels surged. To some, this coincidence suggests that Plato's tale may indeed preserve an echo of real events. Plato's description of Atlantis is rich in detail. The island lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. At its center was a great plain, fertile and irrigated with canals. Its capital city was built in concentric rings of land and sea, crossed by bridges and guarded by towers. In its temples stood golden statues of Poseidon, god of the sea, whom the Atlanteans claimed as their divine ancestor. The Atlanteans grew powerful, extending their rule across the islands of the Atlantic and deep into the Mediterranean. Yet, as Plato tells it, they became corrupted by their wealth and pride. Where once they lived with virtue, they turned toward greed and domination. The gods looked upon their arrogance with disfavor, and so came the destruction. Earthquakes, floods, and finally the swallowing of Atlantis by the sea. Most historians read this as allegory, a myth crafted to teach the dangers of excess. Yet the vividness of the description has always invited speculation. Could such a detailed picture have been invented entirely? Or did Plato draw upon older traditions whose origins he did not fully understand? Across the centuries, seekers have tried to locate Atlantis. Some placed it in the Azores, others in the Caribbean, or on the sunken shelves of the Mediterranean. The island of Santorini, shattered by volcanic eruption in the 2nd millennium BCE, is one of the most popular candidates, yet its date lies far from Plato's 9600 BCE. Others turn to the coast of Spain, to the marshlands of Andalusia, where traces of concentric structures hint at ancient settlements lost to flood. Still others suggest that the tale recalls not a single location, but a memory of rising seas worldwide, the drowning of coastal plains as Ice Age glaciers melted and oceans rose by more than 100 meters. If this is so, then Atlantis is not one city but many, not one island but countless drowned lands. The Doggerland of northern Europe, once a broad plain connecting Britain to the continent, now lies beneath the North Sea. Off the coasts of India, submerged cities have been glimpsed by divers and sonar, their walls and streets now claimed by coral. In the Americas, legends of sunken lands echo along coasts from Cuba to Yucatan. Could Plato's Atlantis have been one voice in a global chorus of memories, each recalling the trauma of rising seas at the end of the Ice Age? The precision of Plato's dating remains one of the great enigmas. 9600 BCE is not a number one invents lightly. At the time Plato wrote, human history was thought to extend back only a few centuries, perhaps a millennium. To name a date more than 11,000 years earlier was extraordinary, and yet modern archaeology confirms that this was indeed a threshold moment. Göbekli Tepe rising in Anatolia, new cultures stirring in the Fertile Crescent, climates shifting, seas encroaching. Could Plato's priests at Sais have preserved genuine records of a world before the flood, passed down through long chains of scribes across millennia? Or was this simply allegory clothed in the grandeur of deep time? Critias, The dialogue in which Plato elaborated Atlantis most fully breaks off mid-sentence. The narrative is unfinished, as though silenced. We do not know whether Plato intended to resolve the tale, or whether death intervened before he could complete it. What remains is a fragment, one of the most tantalizing fragments in the history of human storytelling. Outside of Plato, Atlantis is absent. No other Greek writer describes it in such terms, yet the motif of sunken lands and drowned civilizations pervades myth across cultures. In Mesopotamian epics, the gods send a deluge to cleanse the world, sparing only a remnant. In India, Manu is warned by a fish of rising waters, building a vessel to survive. In Native American traditions, floods come again and again, reshaping the land. In each, echoes of catastrophe endure. Perhaps Plato gave the most famous form to a memory that was already widespread, the memory of a world reshaped by water. Modern science has traced the pulse of meltwater floods at the end of the Ice Age. Around 12,000 years ago, massive lakes trapped beneath retreating glaciers burst forth, pouring into oceans, raising sea levels rapidly. Coastal plains drowned, rivers shifted, and the outlines of continents transformed. For those who lived along the shores, it would have seemed as though the world itself was collapsing. Generations later, the memory may have crystallized into myth, Atlantis among the Greeks, other flood tales elsewhere. And yet the idea persists that Atlantis may have been more than memory, that it was a real place, a real culture, whose ruins still lie hidden beneath seas or sands. Expeditions have scoured the ocean floor, mapped submerged ridges, scanned coastlines for the lost concentric city. None has found proof. And so Atlantis remains poised between allegory and archaeology, between story and stone. Perhaps this is why Plato's account still haunts us. It is not simply the tale of a lost island, but the suggestion that history is deeper, older, and more fragile than we believe. That civilizations may rise and fall, their traces erased by water, remembered only in fragments of myth. That our own world, too, rests on fragile ground. When we read Plato's dialogues, we are confronted with a mystery that resists resolution. Was Atlantis merely a moral parable, a philosopher's invention? Or was it a distorted echo of a true catastrophe, remembered across millennia, marking the boundary between the world of ice and the world of civilization? The dialogues end, but the question does not. Atlantis remains, half in story, half in possibility, its shining city submerged in time, its fate an open wound in the imagination of humankind. Chapter 9. The ice mummies of the Andes high in the frozen solitude of the Andes, where air thins and silence hangs heavy, a secret lay untouched for centuries. Hidden in icy tombs near the summits of mountains, rising above 6,000 meters, the children of the Inca slumbered undisturbed. Their bodies, frozen by snow and ice, remained locked in time, their skin, clothing, and even their final expressions preserved as though they had fallen asleep only yesterday. When archaeologists first encountered them, the effect was haunting. These were not brittle skeletons or fragmented bones. These were whole human beings, mummified by nature itself, offering a direct and intimate encounter with the ancient past. The most famous of these discoveries came in 1999, on the peak of Mount Lulalaco, straddling the border between Argentina and Chile. Johann Reinhard and his team uncovered 3 children, seated within a ceremonial burial site near the summit. Known now as the Lulalaco mummies, they were a boy, a girl of about 6, and a young woman, later called the Maiden, around 15 years old. Their preservation was extraordinary. Woven garments of fine alpaca wool, intricate feathered headdresses, and the details of their braided hair still visible after 5 centuries in the ice. The Maiden's serene expression, her body curled in repose, left even seasoned archaeologists unsettled. It was as if time itself had bent to shield her from decay. These children were not victims of violence in the way we might first imagine. They were part of the Inca ritual known as capacocha. This practice, performed to honor the gods, was among the most sacred of offerings. Selected children, chosen for their purity, beauty, and lineage, were prepared over months, perhaps years. They were paraded through Cusco, the Inca capital, and then led in solemn processions to remote mountaintops. There, amid ceremonies of prayer, music, and offerings of gold, pottery, and food, they were left to the elements. In Inca belief, These children did not die but joined the gods in the sky, interceding for their people. Modern science, however, provides a more intimate glimpse into their final hours. Tests on the Lulailako mummies revealed traces of coca leaves and chicha, a fermented maize beer, in their systems. These substances may have eased their journey, dulling fear or inducing a trance-like state. The maiden's braids suggest she was carefully groomed for the ritual, while the younger girl, sometimes called the lightning girl, after a posthumous strike scarred her body, showed signs of physical ailments. The boy, bound in textiles, bore evidence of respiratory infection. Each child, unique in life, became part of a single sacrifice meant to sustain the cosmic order of the Inca world. The discovery of these mummies was not the first of its kind. Earlier in 1995, Reinhard uncovered the Ice Maiden on Peru's Mount Ampato. Her body, too, was astonishingly preserved, wrapped in fine textiles and surrounded by ceremonial objects. Locals who had long climbed the mountain had never disturbed her resting place, hidden beneath volcanic ash and ice. Other finds followed, revealing that mountaintop sacrifices were not rare but central to Inca spiritual life, with dozens of peaks across Peru, Chile, and Argentina still bearing traces of these sacred burials. What these mummies reveal is more than the ritual of sacrifice. They are time capsules of Inca society, freezing in place the textiles, food, and beliefs of the empire at its height. The fabrics woven with llama and alpaca wool show not only artistic skill but symbols of rank and devotion. The offerings buried with the children, tiny figurines in gold and silver, decorated with feather headdresses, embody the wealth and cosmology of the empire. Through them, archaeologists glimpse a world where mountain peaks were not mere landscapes but living deities, towering mediators between earth and heaven. And yet, as haunting as these discoveries are, they also raise deeper questions. How many more mummies still lie entombed in the ice, untouched by human eyes? The Andes stretch thousands of kilometers, with countless peaks exceeding 5,000 meters. Many remain unexplored, their summits locked in perpetual snow. If the Inca sacrificed children across the breadth of their empire, then dozens, perhaps hundreds, of frozen bodies could still lie hidden, waiting for the day when shifting glaciers or human exploration reveals them. There is also the unsettling thought of what ice preserves beyond human ritual. If a few centuries of freezing conditions can shield the children of the Inca so perfectly, what might deeper glaciers conceal from far older times? Could entire epochs of human history, unwritten, unknown, be preserved within frozen mountain vaults beyond the reach of current archaeology? Ice, unlike stone or soil, halts decay with merciless precision. It does not merely bury, it suspends. It holds memory intact until chance or science intervenes. The ice mummies of the Andes remind us that history is not always found in ruins or texts. Sometimes it lies in human faces, preserved in silence, staring back at us across centuries. To look at the Maiden of Lulailako is to confront not an artifact, but a person, a young woman who lived, breathed, and walked beneath the sun of the Inca Empire. Her death was ritual, but her preservation was accidental, an unintended gift of the mountain itself. In her stillness, she bridges the gulf between past and present, between the world we know and the world we can only imagine. And so, as scientists continue to climb the Andes and probe their frozen summits, the question lingers. How many more human stories remain locked in ice, unseen beneath the snowfields and glaciers? Each peak may hold its own testimony, a memory sealed by frost, waiting for the moment when the mountain relents and reveals what it has hidden. For now, the children of the Inca sleep on, guardians of a history both sacred and terrifying. Their silent presence a reminder of how thin the line is between ritual devotion and eternal mystery. Chapter 10. The Megaliths of Malta Beneath the Sea. On a rocky island in the middle of the Mediterranean, temples older than Stonehenge rise from the earth. Malta, a sun-drenched archipelago south of Sicily, holds some of the earliest monumental stone structures known to humanity. The megalithic complexes of Gantija, Hagarkim, Menajdra, and Tarxian, dating back as far as 3600 BCE, are among the oldest freestanding buildings ever discovered. Their massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 50 tons, are arranged in sweeping curves, apses, and chambers that suggest not mere shelters, but spaces of ritual. Carvings of spirals, animals, and the stylized figures of the Fat Lady hint at a world of fertility rites, cosmological alignments, and sacred ceremonies. Archaeologists agree that Malta was a center of a unique prehistoric culture, thriving millennia before the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome. Yet Malta's mysteries do not end with the temples that stand on land. Divers have long reported structures beneath the surrounding seas, blocks, alignments, and forms that suggest megaliths now submerged. If these are truly artificial, they would push the story of Malta's ancient culture into a deeper past, before the rising seas of the post-Ice Age world engulfed its coastal plains. The official narrative tells us that after the last glacial maximum, around 20,000 years ago, global sea levels began to rise. By 9600 BCE, as the Ice Age ended, meltwater floods surged across the continents. The Mediterranean, connected to the world ocean, swelled upward, drowning low-lying land. Malta, once part of a larger bridge between Sicily and North Africa, shrank to its present size. Shorelines retreated inland, valleys became bays, and ancient landscapes vanished beneath the waves. It is in these drowned zones that rumours of underwater megaliths emerge. Off the coast of Marsaxlokk Bay, divers claim to have seen rectilinear blocks aligned like walls. Near St. Julian's and other coves, formations resembling paved floors or platforms have been reported. The most famous site is near the island of Gozo, where divers describe a submerged structure with massive stone blocks, reminiscent of the temples above water. Skeptics argue that these are natural formations, limestone shaped by erosion, currents, and fracture patterns. The Mediterranean seabed is rich with geology that can mimic human architecture, straight fractures, terraces, and jointed rock beds. To leap from pattern to temple is dangerous, yet those who have seen the structures insist that their order, their scale, and their placement suggest intention. Malta already bears other enigmatic marks of prehistory. Across the island, shallow parallel grooves cut into limestone bedrock run for kilometers. Known as cart ruts, these tracks resemble channels made by repeated use of wheeled vehicles. Yet they are dated to the Bronze Age or earlier, long before any evidence of the wheel in Malta. Some run into the sea, disappearing beneath the waves, as if continuing into drowned landscapes now hidden from view. If the cart ruts truly extend into submerged terrain, they may support the idea that parts of Malta's prehistoric culture now lie underwater. Perhaps the same people who raised the megaliths on land also built along coasts that were later swallowed by rising seas. The temples of Malta themselves defy easy explanation. Their curvilinear plans, often oriented to solstices and celestial events, suggest sophisticated knowledge of astronomy. At Menidra, on the morning of the equinox, sunlight passes precisely through the temple entrance to illuminate central stones. Such alignments reveal a worldview in which sky and stone were woven together in ritual. If Malta's builders could align their sanctuaries to the heavens, is it so impossible that they also constructed monuments along the ancient shoreline? Monuments now hidden beneath the sea. The broader context deepens the question. Around the world, hints of submerged structures appear in similar settings. Off the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, divers explore vast underwater terraces and blocks, which some argue are man-made, while others dismiss as geology. In India's Gulf of Cambay, sonar has revealed patterns on the seabed that may be remnants of ancient cities. In the North Sea, Doggerland once held human settlements, now lost beneath waves. Malta's underwater mysteries belong to this global pattern. Tantalizing glimpses of possible civilizations drowned at the end of the Ice Age, their remains blurring into the natural rock. The debate mirrors our uncertainty about prehistory itself. How much has been lost, how much survives, and how much we have yet to discover. Archaeologists remain cautious. Without direct excavation, it is difficult to distinguish between geology and construction. The Mediterranean's limestone fractures can create surfaces that mimic walls, pavements, and steps. Diving conditions are difficult, with shifting sands obscuring details. Some early reports of megaliths offshore remain unverified, their photographs ambiguous. But mystery thrives where proof is elusive. For seekers of lost civilizations, Malta is not merely another island with ancient temples. It is a possible outpost of something far older, perhaps a culture that rose before the floodwaters, a culture whose memory flickers in Plato's dialogues, in flood myths, and in the silent stones beneath the sea. If submerged temples exist, They may extend Malta's story far beyond 3600 BCE. They would suggest that the island's sacred architecture was not born in isolation, but carried forward from an earlier tradition, perhaps as old as the end of the Ice Age itself. Survivors of drowned coasts may have resettled on the higher ground of Malta, raising new temples in stone as echoes of what was lost. Such a vision is speculative, yet it resonates with the enigmas Malta already offers. Why did a small island culture, without cities or writing, invest so much in vast ritual structures? Why were these temples aligned with the sun and stars? Why do cart ruts plunge into the sea? Each question adds weight to the possibility that Malta's builders were heirs to a deeper memory, one tied to cycles of sea and stone, flood and renewal. Today, divers continue to search Malta's coasts, photographing formations, mapping patterns, and debating their meaning. No definitive excavation has yet proven the existence of a submerged megalithic temple, but the allure persists, for even if the structures turn out to be natural, the very possibility awakens the imagination. Malta sits at a crossroads of myth and geology, where natural forms blur into human memory. On its surface stand temples as old as any on Earth, whispering of a culture whose rituals reach toward the heavens. Beneath its waves may lie other structures, or only the tricks of stone. Either way, Malta reminds us that much of human prehistory lies not in deserts or forests, but beneath the seas, drowned in silence after the great floods of long ago. As the Mediterranean sun sinks beyond the horizon, the stones of Malta glow gold in the fading light. On land, temples endure, mute but magnificent. Beneath the waves, shadows shift across the seabed, perhaps concealing ruins, perhaps only rock. We do not yet know, but the sea remembers, and in its depths the story of Malta, half written in stone, half submerged in mystery, waits for us to return. Chapter 11. The Lost World Beneath Lake. Titicaca high in the heart of the Andes, where the sky seems impossibly close and the air thins with every breath, lies a lake unlike any other. Lake Titicaca, stretching across the borders of Peru and Bolivia, is the highest navigable lake on Earth, resting at nearly 3,800 meters above sea level. Its waters glisten with an otherworldly light, mirroring both the peaks of the Cordillera Real and the timeless myths whispered by the peoples who have lived along its shores for millennia. But beneath this vast expanse of blue lies something more than water. Divers who have descended into its depths have spoken of ancient walls, of sunken terraces, of stones arranged in ways that suggest deliberate design. To explore Titicaca is to enter a world where myth and archaeology brush closely against one another, and where memory itself seems to float between the waves. The first systematic attempts to study these underwater ruins began in the late 20th century. In the 1960s and 70s, both Bolivian and international teams of divers reported curious structures below the surface, but it was in 2000, under the guidance of the Acacor Geographical Exploring Society, that one of the most ambitious explorations took place. Supported by the Bolivian government, divers identified more than 200 submerged sites beneath the lake. Among them were walls of stone stretching in straight lines, terraces carved into the submerged landscape, and what some described as roads leading into the darkness of the water. Most striking of all was a temple-like structure, its base lying more than 30 feet below the surface, with carefully cut stones suggesting construction rather than accident. Archaeologists remain cautious. Some argue that the structures may be remnants of settlements or ceremonial centers belonging to pre-Inca cultures, later drowned when the water level of the lake shifted. Others point out that Lake Titicaca has always been a place of rising and falling shorelines, where tectonic forces and climate changes alternately exposed and concealed the land. To them, the ruins beneath its waters are not proof of a single catastrophe, but of long cycles of human adaptation to a volatile environment. Yet the sheer scale of what has been identified continues to stir questions. Who built these walls and terraces, and how far back in time do they reach? The mythology surrounding Lake Titicaca deepens its mystery. In Inca tradition, it was here, upon the island of the sun, that the creator god Viracocha rose from the waters after a great flood. From this sacred place, he summoned forth the first ancestors of the Inca, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo, who would go on to found Cusco, the navel of the world, and the Inca Empire itself. The lake, in this telling, is both cradle and grave, the womb from which civilization emerged, and the tomb where older worlds were drowned. For the Inca, the waters were alive with sacred power, and the ruins glimpsed beneath them may well have been understood as traces of a world erased before their own began. Archaeological finds along the lake's margins support the view that its shores were once home to thriving cultures long before the rise of the Inca. The Tiwanaku civilization, which flourished between 500 and 1000 CE, left behind monumental stonework, ceremonial complexes, and enigmatic statues near the southern edge of the lake. Their influence spread widely across the Andes, and their relationship with Titicaca was profound. Some scholars speculate that the submerged ruins might belong to the Tiwanaku or to even earlier societies whose names have been lost to time. Pottery fragments, carved stones, and agricultural terraces discovered underwater lend weight to the idea that thriving communities once lived where only fish now swim. Yet the image of a lost world beneath Lake Titicaca is not only archaeological, it is also psychological, mythic, and universal. Nearly every culture that has lived near water carries with it memories of floods, of drowned lands, of civilizations lost beneath rising waves. At Titicaca, these motifs converge in a tangible form, real ruins beneath real water, tied to living traditions that speak of creation after destruction. To walk the shores of the lake is to hear echoes of both history and legend, mingling inseparably. The lake itself seems designed to conceal secrets. Its depths are murky, its visibility limited. At nearly 280 meters deep in places, it remains largely unexplored by divers who are hampered by altitude, cold, and darkness. What has been identified so far may only be a fragment of what lies below. Entire complexes, villages, or ceremonial centers may rest in silence beneath its waters, preserved by silt and hidden from the surface world. The thought that ancient staircases may still lead nowhere, or that altars carved to forgotten gods may still stand unseen in the lake's depths, is a reminder of how much of human history remains submerged, literally and figuratively. As science advances, so too does the possibility of revelation. Remote sensing technologies, sonar mapping, and robotic exploration hold promise for uncovering more of the lake's hidden architecture. Each discovery could reshape our understanding not only of Andean prehistory but of the larger story of how humans adapted to dramatic environmental changes at the close of the last ice age. Were these ruins drowned suddenly by floods connected to glacial melt and climate shifts, or were they gradually abandoned as shorelines advanced year by year, century by century? The answers remain elusive, and perhaps that is why Lake Titicaca continues to captivate. It exists at the crossroads of certainty and speculation, where archaeology and myth are equally at home. It forces us to confront the fragility of civilizations, how entire worlds can be drowned and yet remembered in sacred story. In the calm stillness of its waters, one feels both the weight of time and the silence of what has been lost. To gaze across Lake Titicaca at sunset, as the mountains turn gold and the sky deepens into violet, is to look upon a mirror of history itself, reflecting, concealing, distorting, and hinting. Somewhere below, roads lead into darkness, temples rest unseen, and the dreams of vanished peoples lie cradled in silt. Were these truly the foundations of civilizations erased by water? Or are they simply fragments of more recent cultures, misread by our longing for deeper origins? The lake offers no answer, only the shimmer of its surface, inviting us to wonder what else sleeps beneath the waves. Chapter 12. The Mysterious Piri Reis Map-In. The year 1513, as Europe's age of discovery was still unfolding, an Ottoman admiral spread out a sheet of gazelle skin and began to draw. His name was Ahmed Muhiddin Piri, remembered by history as Piri Reis, sailor, scholar, and cartographer of the empire. Upon that parchment, he sketched a world, its coastlines traced with care, its seas filled with ships, notes, and mysterious references. What emerged was a fragmentary map that centuries later would ignite one of the most enduring enigmas of historical cartography. The Piri Reis map was not rediscovered until 1929, when German theologian Gustav Deissmann stumbled upon it in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul. Hidden among forgotten bundles, the parchment revealed only part of a larger chart, covering the western coasts of Africa, Europe, and South America. But it was the southern section that stirred a storm of speculation. There, faintly drawn, appeared a coastline resembling Antarctica, yet in an ice-free form. long before modern science revealed what lay beneath its frozen mantle. At first glance, the map seems to depict South America curving eastward, its lower reaches extending far beyond their true position. Yet some researchers noticed that the drawn land did not match South America's contours. Instead, they argued, it resembled Queen Maud Land, the section of Antarctica lying beneath 2 kilometers of ice. If so, the implication was staggering, that Piri Reis, drawing in 1513, somehow had access to knowledge of a continent not officially discovered until 1820, and in a form free of ice for at least several thousand years. The admiral himself offered clues. In the marginal notes written in Ottoman Turkish, Piri Reis explained that he had not charted these lands firsthand. Instead, he compiled his map using older sources. Among them, he claimed, were 20 charts and mappe mundi, including maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great. He also mentioned using a chart of Christopher Columbus, one of the earliest ever made of the New World, now lost to history. The thought that Piri Reis may have drawn upon ancient maps, preserving knowledge from civilizations long gone, sparked imaginations across the 20th century. Could it be that fragments of pre-Ice Age cartography had survived, carried across centuries by forgotten mariners and inherited by Renaissance cartographers? Mainstream historians caution against such conclusions. The Piri Reis map, they argue, is a palimpsest of errors and approximations, a composite assembled from diverse sources. The coastline resembling Antarctica may simply be a distorted extension of South America, the result of imperfect copying. In this reading, there is no mystery, only the natural inaccuracies of early 16th century mapmaking. Yet questions persist. The supposed Antarctic coastline on the map appears strikingly detailed, with bays and inlets resembling modern surveys of subglacial terrain. How could such accuracy be achieved without aerial views or satellite imaging? Proponents of the enigma point to the US Air Force surveys of the 1940s, which revealed features beneath the Antarctic ice that appeared oddly close to what Piri Reis had drawn centuries earlier. Charles Hapgood, a history professor in the mid-20th century, brought the mystery to prominence in his book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, 1966. Hapgood proposed that the Piri Reis map preserved fragments of a lost world cartography made when Earth's geography was different. He suggested that an advanced seafaring civilization, existing thousands of years earlier, had mapped the globe with astonishing precision. According to his theory, their knowledge survived through copies handed down over millennia. Eventually reaching Piri Reis, Albert Einstein himself corresponded with Hapgood, noting that his ideas were fascinating and worthy of serious consideration, even if unproven. The notion of an ancient, forgotten civilization mapping the planet resonated with those who sought echoes of Atlantis, Lemuria, or other pre-flood cultures whispered in myth. The debate over Antarctica's ice complicates the matter further. Geological studies show that the continent has been covered by thick ice sheets for millions of years. However, localized evidence suggests that parts of its coastline, particularly Queen Maud Land, may have been seasonally or partially ice-free in the distant past, possibly as late as 6,000 years ago. If this is true, then the Piri Reis map could, in theory, preserve a memory of an earlier shoreline, observed before the ice fully encased it. Yet certainty remains elusive. Critics emphasize that the Antarctic section of the map can be interpreted in many ways. To some, it is a warped version of Tierra del Fuego, the islands at the tip of South America. To others, it is nothing more than a cartographic flourish, a guess at lands beyond the known horizon. Beyond the Antarctic enigma, the Piri Reis map holds other puzzles. It depicts South America with remarkable accuracy for its time, especially along the Brazilian coast. Some scholars argue that the details suggest sources beyond Columbus, who had explored only parts of the Caribbean. Could Piri Reis have had access to maps derived from earlier, unknown expeditions? Viking voyages to Vinland, Phoenician traders crossing the Atlantic, or even earlier seafarers from civilizations erased by time? In his notes, Piri Reis claimed that some of his sources were drawn by infidels from the time of Alexander. This cryptic remark has been interpreted as a reference to ancient Greek or Hellenistic charts, but others see in it a hint of deeper antiquity, knowledge transmitted across empires and ages, the echoes of a seafaring tradition that predated the known record of navigation. The map also reminds us of how much knowledge has been lost, The Library of Alexandria, burned and scattered, once held countless scrolls of geography and exploration. Ancient Mediterranean sailors, from the Minoans to the Phoenicians, plied seas far from home. Carthaginian expeditions are said to have sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the Atlantic, mapping lands that may have included parts of West Africa or even the Americas. Could fragments of these ancient charts have drifted across centuries into the hands of Ottoman cartographers? The very survival of the Piri race map is itself fragile. Only 1/3 of the original world chart remains. The rest, if it ever existed, is lost. What coastlines, what mysteries might have been contained in those missing sections? The Piri race map is both artifact and mirror. To historians, it reflects the eclectic knowledge of the 16th century, a synthesis of medieval Portolan charts, Islamic scholarship, and Renaissance discovery. To seekers of lost civilizations, it is a tantalizing fragment, a breadcrumb pointing back to a forgotten age when unknown mariners mapped the globe. Its gazelle-skin surface is not just a relic of ink and pigment, but a canvas upon which human imagination paints possibilities. Did Piri race unknowingly preserve the last echo of an ancient world? Or are we merely projecting our yearning for forgotten civilizations onto the distortions of a sailor's chart? Today the map rests in the Topkapi Palace Museum, carefully preserved, studied, and debated. Visitors who gaze upon it see more than a coastline. They see the shadow of the unknown. Each line of ink carries both the weight of history and the breath of mystery, straddling the border between fact and myth. And as we look at its southern edge, at the faint lines that may be South America or maybe Antarctica, we are reminded of how thin the veil of history can be. A scrap of parchment, drawn by an admiral 5 centuries ago, has become a window, however blurred, into questions that stretch back tens of millennia. Was it simply error, or was it inheritance? Knowledge passed down from navigators whose names have been erased by flood, fire, and time. The Piri race map does not answer, it whispers. And in that whisper lies the unsettling reminder that history is never as complete as we believe. Chapter 13. Baalbek, the stones beyond imagination. In the fertile Bekaa Valley of modern-day Lebanon, where mountains rise on either side like guardians of memory, stands one of the most astonishing archaeological sites on Earth. Baalbek, known in the ancient world as Heliopolis, the city of the sun, has long drawn pilgrims, emperors, and scholars to marvel at its grandeur. But it is not merely the towering Roman columns, among the tallest ever built, that inspire awe. Beneath them lies a foundation of megalithic stone blocks so vast, so beyond the scale of known construction, that even today their origin and purpose remain cloaked in mystery. To walk among these ruins is to step into a paradox, where archaeology speaks of Roman temples, yet the stones themselves whisper of something far older, perhaps from a time when techniques now lost to humanity were wielded with confidence. At the heart of this enigma lies the so-called trilithon, 3 immense blocks forming part of the temple's podium. Each of these stones measures around 19 meters in length, 4 meters in height, and 3 meters in width, with weights estimated at over 800 tons apiece. They are set with such precision that the joints between them are almost imperceptible. Their placement raises a question that continues to haunt scholars. How could a culture, even one as advanced as Rome, have transported and lifted stones of such magnitude into position atop an already elevated platform? Nearby, in the ancient quarry just south of the site, the mystery deepens. Here rests the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, a monolith weighing an estimated 1,000 tons, partially cut from bedrock but never moved. In 2014, archaeologists revealed yet another stone beneath it, even larger, weighing as much as 1,650 tons. These blocks, abandoned in situ, suggest an ambition that surpasses the limits of known ancient engineering. They invite a haunting thought. Was there once a technology, or a method, capable of handling such colossal masses, now forgotten by history? The mainstream view holds that the Romans, inheriting the site from earlier cultures, were responsible for much of its construction. Indeed, the towering Temple of Jupiter, begun under Emperor Augustus and continued over several centuries, is a testament to Roman skill and ambition. Its 6 surviving columns rise nearly 20 meters, each weighing hundreds of tons, crowned with intricate Corinthian capitals. Yet, while the grandeur of the Roman superstructure is undeniable, many scholars acknowledge that the massive foundation blocks predate the Roman phase. They point to the Phoenicians, who venerated the site as sacred to Baal, or even earlier Canaanite peoples as possible builders of the megalithic podium. Still, the exact date and origin of the foundation remain uncertain, leaving a gap in our understanding that no conventional explanation has yet bridged. Alternative theories abound, reflecting humanity's fascination with what seems impossible. Some researchers speculate that Baalbek preserves the vestiges of a pre-flood civilization, a culture capable of feats of engineering that would be inconceivable to later peoples. In this interpretation, the Romans merely built atop a far older platform, repurposing the stones of an age now lost to myth. Others suggest that the site may have served astronomical or ceremonial purposes tied to gods of the sky and sun, aligning Baalbek with other megalithic centers of antiquity, whose builders remain shrouded in obscurity. What complicates the story further is the technical challenge. Even with modern cranes, moving stones of this magnitude would be nearly impossible. Experiments have shown that ancient builders could transport blocks weighing up to 200 or 300 tons using wooden rollers, sledges, and coordinated labor. But the leap from hundreds to over 1,000 tons strains these models to their breaking point. The logistics of hauling the stone of the pregnant woman from quarry to temple, over uneven terrain, without advanced machinery, defy easy explanation. Was it left behind because even its makers realized the task was impossible? Or was the project abandoned for reasons unrelated to engineering, leaving the stone as a silent monument to ambition interrupted? Baalbek's enigma is not only technical but cultural. The site has been sacred for millennia, a place where layers of civilizations converge. For the Phoenicians, it was associated with Baal, the storm god, and Astarte, goddess of fertility. The Greeks identified it with Helios, the sun, hence the name Heliopolis. Later, under Rome, it became a center of imperial worship, with vast temples dedicated to Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus. The persistence of devotion at this site, from the Bronze Age through classical antiquity, suggests that Baalbek was always more than stone. It was a place where heaven and earth were thought to meet, where the gods themselves seemed to descend. The megalithic foundations, in this sense, may have been as much a statement of sacred permanence as of engineering prowess. In the myths of the region too, faint echoes linger. Some traditions claim that Baalbek was built by giants, or by the first humans after the flood, endowed with knowledge now lost. Medieval Arab historians speculated that Solomon's jinn, supernatural beings bound to serve him, erected the great stones of the site. These legends, though symbolic, reflect a human instinct to look upon the impossible and ascribe it to beings beyond ourselves. Whether giants, gods, or forgotten engineers, the builders of Baalbek remain nameless, their methods unrecorded, their intentions obscured. Modern archaeological study continues, yet the questions multiply. Why were such colossal stones needed when smaller, more manageable blocks could have sufficed? Why undertake an effort so extraordinary unless it served a purpose beyond practicality? Some propose that the podium was intended to elevate the temple closer to the sky, aligning it with celestial events. Others see in it a symbolic act, to build with stones so immense that they would endure as long as the mountains themselves. And perhaps that was the point, to anchor a sacred city not just in place, but in eternity. Walking among the ruins today, one feels the weight of that ambition. The stones dwarf the human figure, their edges sharp against the backdrop of the valley. Tourists stand in silence before the pregnant woman's stone, dwarfed by its sheer immensity, unable to imagine how it could have been moved. In the temple complex itself, the Roman columns rise above the megalithic base like a palimpsest of history, one civilization writing over another, yet never erasing the foundation that came before. Baalbek remains then a riddle in stone. Its ruins offer a rare glimpse into the scale of ancient imagination, a scale that stretches our own sense of possibility. Whether the product of Roman, Phoenician, or something older still, the stones themselves defy simple categorization. They remind us that the past is not a straight line of progress, but a landscape marked by peaks of brilliance and valleys of forgetting. Techniques known to one age may vanish in the next, leaving only questions for those who follow. And so the stones of Baalbek endure, silent, unmoving, yet heavy with meaning. They are more than relics. They are thresholds into the unknown, inviting us to consider not only what was built, but what was lost. Did their makers inherit knowledge from a world before the flood, as some have dared to suggest? Or are they simply the ultimate expression of human will, stretched to its utmost limit? The truth rests somewhere between stone and silence, waiting, perhaps forever, beyond imagination. Chapter 14. Antarctica's Buried Mountain Ranges. For centuries, the map of Antarctica seemed deceptively simple, a white wilderness, barren and flat, stretching to the horizon in every direction. To early explorers, it was a featureless sheet of ice, concealing little more than endless cold. Yet in the 20th century, when the hidden heart of the continent was probed with radar and seismic instruments, a startling revelation emerged. Beneath the frozen surface lay mountains. Not small ridges, but vast ranges, their peaks and valleys sealed under kilometers of ancient ice. These are the Gamburtsev Mountains, a buried range as large and complex as the European Alps. Hidden beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, they extend for some 1,200 kilometers, their highest summits rising nearly 3,000 meters above the ancient bedrock floor. Their discovery in 1958, during the International Geophysical Year, sent ripples of astonishment through the geological world. How could such mountains exist, so sharp and rugged, yet so deeply entombed beneath ice that has lain undisturbed for millions of years? The Gamburtsev Mountains are paradoxical. By all reasoning, a range buried for tens of millions of years should have eroded into smooth plateaus. Yet radar images reveal peaks that appear young, sharp, and alpine. Their valleys cut deep, suggesting rivers once coursed between them, shaping their slopes before the ice closed over. Scientists suspect that these mountains may have formed more than 1 billion years ago, then rejuvenated by tectonic forces about 250 million years ago, before finally being sealed by ice around 34 million years ago, when Antarctica froze over. But the precise mechanism of their survival remains unclear. How did erosion fail to wear them down across such vast stretches of time? What processes allowed them to remain jagged and preserved, as if time itself had stopped beneath the ice? For geologists, the Gamburtsev Mountains are a puzzle of Earth's hidden architecture. For others, they are something more. A buried landscape, untouched by wind or rain for eons, potentially preserving within its valleys the remnants of ancient rivers, lakes, or even ecosystems that thrived before the ice took hold. Imaging suggests that liquid water still flows beneath the ice, trapped by geothermal heat and pressure. Subglacial lakes, like Lake Vostok, lie concealed in the darkness, untouched for millions of years. Could the Gamburtsev range shelter such hidden oases? If valleys exist there, carved by ancient rivers and sealed in a deep freeze, they may be time capsules of past climates, snapshots of a greener, warmer Antarctica. The very idea invites deeper speculation. Was there a time in the far past when Antarctica was habitable? Fossil evidence from coastal outcrops confirms that it once was. Remnants of temperate forests have been found, dating back 90 million years, when Antarctica was warm enough to support broadleaf trees and flowering plants. In even earlier epochs, dinosaurs walked across its plains. More recently, during interglacial periods, parts of the continent may have been ice-free, sustaining tundra ecosystems. Some scientists suggest that the Gamburtsev valleys, locked away beneath kilometers of ice, could still preserve traces of these lost worlds. Frozen pollen, ancient soil, or microbial life could lie in suspended animation, waiting to be found. The isolation of the Gamburtsev Mountains makes direct exploration nearly impossible. Buried beneath more than 2 kilometers of solid ice, they remain hidden from human eyes. Remote sensing offers only glimpses, radar echoes, seismic vibrations, gravitational anomalies. These instruments sketch the contours of mountains unseen, ghostly outlines of a hidden continent within a continent. The difficulty of access has given space for myth to intertwine with science. To some, the Gamburtsev range becomes more than geology. It becomes the imagined home of lost civilizations, preserved beneath the Antarctic ice. Writers have speculated about cities frozen in time, remnants of cultures that flourished before a cataclysm of ice erased them. The sharpness of the peaks, the secrecy of their concealment, seem almost to invite the projection of forgotten histories. While mainstream science finds no evidence for such civilizations, the allure remains strong. Antarctica has long been linked to myth. Ancient maps, like the Piri Reis chart, have been interpreted, rightly or wrongly, as depictions of an ice-free southern continent. Plato's tale of Atlantis, destroyed around 9600 BCE, echoes with tantalizing parallels to the sudden flooding and climate upheavals that shaped the Earth at the end of the Ice Age. Could Antarctica's buried mountains hold memories of such a forgotten age? Even within scientific circles, the mysteries persist. What role did the Gamburtsev Range play in the birth of the East Antarctic ice sheet itself? Some researchers believe that the mountains acted as a nucleus, their valleys capturing snow and ice that gradually expanded outward to engulf the continent. In this sense, the hidden peaks are not merely passive victims of glaciation. They may be the very foundation of Antarctica's frozen crown. The ice above them is a library of deep time. Ice cores drilled from East Antarctica reveal climate records stretching back 800,000 years, layers of snowfall compressed into crystalline memory. But below the ice lies another archive untouched: the ancient bedrock, rivers and valleys of the Gamburtsev Range. If reached, they could tell stories not just of climates, but of entire worlds erased from the surface. Efforts to probe this hidden world continue. Radar mapping missions, from Soviet teams in the 1950s to European Space Agency surveys in the 2000s, have gradually refined our image of the buried mountains. Yet they remain outlines, shadows on the edge of knowledge. Direct drilling would be technologically daunting, requiring not just penetration of ice kilometers thick, but protection of fragile subglacial ecosystems from contamination. For now, the Gamburtsev Range remains a distant frontier, glimpsed but not touched. Perhaps it is fitting. The mountains lie in silence, shrouded beneath a veil of white, reminding us that much of our planet is still unexplored, not in distant galaxies, but here, beneath our feet. Their secrecy invites us to wonder not just about geology, but about history, memory, and the fragility of knowledge. As the winds sweep across Antarctica's endless surface, the Gamburtsev Mountains endure below unseen, waiting. In their valleys may lie preserved rivers, frozen soil, or evidence of climates long past. Or perhaps something more, traces of life, or the faintest echo of human presence, carried in myth across time. We do not yet know. The ice will not easily give up its secrets, but beneath that frozen shield rests an entire landscape, a hidden world as vast as Europe, sealed in silence for millions of years. And as long as it remains buried, it will continue to stir our imagination, half geology, half legend, reminding us that even in an age of satellites and global maps, the Earth still holds realms unseen and mysteries that resist the grasp of certainty. Chapter 15. The underwater ruins of Dwarka, India off the western coast of India, where the waters of the Arabian Sea lap against the shoreline of Gujarat, lies one of the most tantalizing enigmas of South Asia's deep past. Here, submerged beneath the restless tides, divers and sonar scans have revealed the outlines of what appear to be ancient structures. Walls, foundations, even streets, extending across a vast underwater landscape. To some, this is the legendary city of Dwarka, the dwelling place of Krishna, hero and deity of the Hindu epics. To others, these formations are nothing more than the remnants of eroded geology, misinterpreted through the lens of myth. Yet whatever their nature, the ruins of Dwarka press upon us a question older than history itself. What lies hidden beneath the seas we take for granted? The story begins not in the modern era of exploration, but in the verses of ancient texts. The Mahabharata and the Harivamsa describe Dwarka as a resplendent city built by Krishna on the western shore. Said to have been constructed of gleaming stone adorned with towers, gates and markets, Dwarka was no mere settlement. It was a capital, a seat of divine kingship. But the stories do not end in glory. They tell that after Krishna's departure from the world, the city was swallowed by the sea, leaving only memory in its wake. For centuries, scholars treated this account as myth, a sacred allegory woven into the fabric of Hindu tradition. Yet in recent decades, evidence has surfaced that forces us to reconsider where the line between legend and history truly lies. In the early 1980s, marine archaeologists from India's National Institute of Oceanography began surveying the Gulf of Khambhat, north of present-day Dwarka. Using side-scan sonar, they detected geometric patterns on the seabed, lines and rectangular shapes stretching for kilometers. Divers who descended into the murky waters reported stone blocks arranged as if in walls, and pottery fragments were retrieved from the sediments. Some of these fragments, when subjected to radiocarbon dating, yielded ages as old as 9,000 years. If accurate, such a date would place the ruins not only before the Indus Valley civilization, but thousands of years before the accepted dawn of urbanism anywhere in the world. The implications were staggering. Could it be that beneath the waters of Gujarat lay the remains of a civilization lost to time, a city that rivaled the great river cultures of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus before they even rose? Could the descriptions in the Mahabharata be more than allegory, echoes of real events preserved in the memory of a people who witnessed their city sink beneath the waves? Mainstream archaeology has met these claims with caution, even skepticism. Some argue that the sonar images and underwater formations are the result of natural geological processes, erosion, sediment layering, and the fracturing of seabed rock. Others note that pottery fragments retrieved from the area may have been carried by river currents rather than belonging to an underwater city. The dating, too, remains controversial, with some scientists questioning whether the oldest dates truly correspond to human activity. The sea, ever shifting, mixes relics and sediments in ways that cloud the line between artifact and accident. Yet the discoveries have not been easily dismissed. In 2000 and 2001, further explorations brought more stone blocks to light, some with drilled holes suggesting human modification. Divers reported what looked like steps carved into bedrock, pavements aligned at right angles, and large structural remains now entombed in silt. For many, these observations are enough to raise the possibility of a lost urban landscape drowned in antiquity. To place Dwarka in context, we must consider the shifting shorelines of the post-glacial world. Around 10,000 years ago, as the last ice age gave way to warming, global sea levels rose dramatically, by over 100 meters in some regions. Vast tracts of coastal plains were inundated, erasing human settlements that had thrived along rivers and deltas. This was no sudden apocalyptic flood, but a series of pulses and surges that transformed coastlines. In this light, the tale of Dwarka's submergence acquires new resonance. Could the memory of rising seas, passed down through generations, have crystallized into the story of a sacred city lost to the ocean? Hindu tradition itself lends a mythic depth to this interpretation. The texts describe Krishna leading his people to build Dwarka after leaving the city of Mathura, fashioning a new home upon the seashore. They speak of a city with splendid avenues and palaces, visited by sages and kings, only to be claimed by the waters after Krishna's death. Here is a narrative that blends myth, theology, and the lived experience of a people facing the uncertainty of changing landscapes. It may be less a single historical account than a synthesis of memory, encoding the trauma of a world transformed by the inexorable rise of the sea. What we know for certain is that the waters off Gujarat conceal layers of history still largely unexplored. Archaeological dives have been hindered by poor visibility, strong currents, and the vastness of the submerged area. Unlike terrestrial ruins, where walls and inscriptions can be carefully documented, underwater remains often appear fragmentary, scattered, or eroded. To build a clear picture of ancient Dwarka requires patience, technology, and a willingness to confront both the evidence and its silences. And yet, silence is part of the allure. Beneath the Arabian Sea, the stones rest as they have for millennia, their sharp edges softened by time, their secrets guarded by silt and tide. To look upon them is to feel the pull of two truths: the measured skepticism of science and the haunting persistence of myth. Both whisper that something lies here worth remembering, something that may bridge the gulf between what we believe we know and what has been forgotten. Across the world, other submerged landscapes have begun to yield their secrets. Doggerland beneath the North Sea, villages drowned in the Black Sea, the enigmatic platforms of Yonaguni off Japan. In each case, human settlement collided with rising seas, leaving fragments for later generations to puzzle over. Dwarka fits within this larger pattern, a reminder that the ocean floor is not empty, but a vast archive of human stories sealed away by water. For India, the question of Dwarka carries special weight. It is not only a potential archaeological site, but a sacred geography, a place tied to the divine narrative of Krishna himself. To prove or disprove its historicity is to touch upon the intersection of science and faith, history and identity. Perhaps this is why the site continues to inspire both controversy and devotion. It challenges us to look deeper, to ask not only whether the ruins are real, but what it means if they are. Standing on the shores of modern Dwarka today, pilgrims gaze out across the waves, offering prayers to Krishna at temples that still rise above the sea. Few imagine that beneath the waters stretches another city, older than memory, resting in silence. Yet for those who dive into the depths, the vision of submerged walls and terraces lingers, calling to mind the words of the ancient epics. A city once radiant with life, now a shadow beneath the waves. The ruins of Dwarka remain a riddle. Were they carved by human hands in an age far older than we dare to imagine, only to be drowned by the seas? Or are they the sculptures of nature, mistaken for memory's architecture? The answer eludes us still, but in that uncertainty lies a truth, that history is not only written on stone or clay, but in myth, in memory, and in the restless movements of the earth itself. And so, Dwarka endures, not just as a city beneath the sea, but as a symbol of the delicate thread between legend and history. To look upon its submerged ruins is to feel the presence of both, entwined like the currents that conceal them. Somewhere in the silence of the depths, the stones of Dwarka still wait, asking whether we will one day hear their story in full, or whether it will remain forever veiled, a secret of the sea. Chapter 16. The Great Flood of Mesopotamia. Long before the words of Genesis were etched into parchment, long before the deluge of Noah was told from pulpit and prayer, the people of Mesopotamia inscribed their own memory of a great flood. On clay tablets pressed with cuneiform, the oldest known form of writing, they preserved stories of waters that swallowed kingdoms, of cities reduced to silence beneath the surge. It is here, in the fertile crescent between the Tigris and the Euphrates, that one of humanity's oldest flood myths was first committed to record. The most famous of these is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, composed in Sumer around 2100 BCE and copied for centuries thereafter. In its verses, the king of Uruk journeys to find Utnapishtim, a man who survived a flood so vast it destroyed the world of men. Utnapishtim tells his story, how the gods decreed a cleansing, how he was warned to build a great vessel, how he gathered his family, craftsmen and animals, and how, when the storm subsided, his boat came to rest upon a distant mountain. The tale is unmistakably familiar. Thousands of years later, it would echo in the biblical account of Noah's Ark, and in flood legends whispered across the globe. But were these stories allegory, morality dressed as myth, or did they preserve the memory of something real? Archaeology offers tantalizing clues. In 1929, British archaeologist Leonard Woolley excavated the ancient city of Ur, once a jewel of Sumer. Digging through layers of occupation, his team came upon a deposit of river silt nearly 3 meters thick, lying between strata of human settlement. To Woolley, it was clear this was evidence of a catastrophic flood, a deluge that had buried the city before life returned above it. He proclaimed he had found the flood of the Sumerians, the historical kernel behind their epic tales. Other sites across Mesopotamia reveal similar flood deposits, though none align perfectly in time or scale. At Kish, Shuruppak, and Uruk, layers of sediment interrupt the ruins of early cities, pointing to destructive inundations. Each seems local, not global, yet devastating enough to impress themselves upon cultural memory. In a land where the Tigris and Euphrates shift course unpredictably, and seasonal rains can swell into torrents, floods were a familiar terror. But sometimes they were more than ordinary. Sometimes they reshaped entire landscapes. The Sumerians saw their gods in the rhythms of the rivers. The Euphrates was not merely a stream of water, it was a force of judgment, both life-giving and destructive. Irrigation had allowed cities to flourish in the Mesopotamian plain, but it also bound their survival to the caprice of the waters. A sudden, unseasonal flood could wipe out crops, drown fields, and erase villages overnight. To a society still fresh from the dawn of writing, such a catastrophe would feel like the wrath of heaven itself. Perhaps, then, the Great Flood was not one event, but the memory of many, fused together, magnified and sanctified into myth. Each inundation, each ruined harvest, each drowned city added another layer to a story retold until it became timeless. Yet geological whispers hint at something larger. Around 5600 BCE, long before the rise of Sumer, the Black Sea Basin may have experienced a cataclysmic flood. As global sea levels rose after the Ice Age, Mediterranean waters are thought to have breached the Bosporus, pouring into the Black Sea with a force unmatched in living memory. Archaeologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman argued that this event, flooding thousands of square kilometers of inhabited land, could have seeded the great flood traditions of the Near East. Others point to the Persian Gulf, once a fertile plain where rivers met the sea. As waters rose, this lowland may have drowned, displacing early communities whose descendants carried stories of a world lost beneath the waves. To these ancient peoples, the flood was not abstract. It was memory, passed down as warning and lament. The Epic of Gilgamesh preserves details that resonate with uncanny precision. Utnapishtim describes sealing his ark with pitch, a practice well known in Mesopotamian boat building. He tells of releasing birds to test whether dry land had reappeared. A raven, a dove, and a swallow, just as Noah would do in later scripture. These motifs, practical yet symbolic, suggest a story rooted in lived experience, refracted through the lens of myth. When biblical scribes composed the Book of Genesis centuries later, they drew upon older traditions preserved in Babylonian exile. The flood of Noah is not an isolated tale, but part of a tapestry of ancient memory. The Atrahasis epic, another Mesopotamian text older than Gilgamesh, recounts a flood sent by the gods to silence humanity's clamour, with a lone survivor preserving life in a boat. Again and again, the same themes emerge: divine judgment, human survival, and renewal after destruction. But why did these peoples cling so fiercely to the memory of a flood? Perhaps because it symbolized the fragility of civilization itself. The first cities of Sumer rose from floodplains, fertile yet precarious. Their wealth depended on canals and irrigation, systems easily undone by nature's force. To live in Mesopotamia was to live with the knowledge that everything could be swept away in a single season. The flood became a metaphor for impermanence, for the thin boundary between order and chaos. Still, the question lingers. Was there a singular, extraordinary flood behind the stories? Some geologists argue that a massive inundation struck the region around 2900 BCE, consistent with flood layers found in Shuruppak and Kish. This timing aligns intriguingly with the Sumerian king list, a text that records a great flood, dividing the reigns of kings before and after. If true, then a specific catastrophe may indeed underlie the myth, a cataclysm that marked the boundary between eras. Whether singular or collective, local or expansive, the Mesopotamian flood myths reveal a deeper truth: that memory endures when carved into story. The people of Sumer did not write scientific reports. They wove epics, inscribed warnings, and offered prayers. In their telling, the flood became not just history, but theology, a reminder that human ambition is fragile against the cosmos. And yet, even now, their words stir questions beyond faith. Could remnants of earlier, lost civilizations lie beneath the alluvial plains of Iraq, erased by ancient waters? Were the first experiments in agriculture, settlement and ritual drowned, their memories surviving only as myth? Did these floods carry away not only mud brick walls, but entire chapters of human prehistory? Standing on the banks of the Euphrates today, the rivers seem eternal, their slow waters winding through desert and ruin. But beneath their calm surface lies the memory of tempests. In the depths of the soil, archaeologists still uncover layers of clay and silt, silent witnesses to ancient floods. Each tablet, each layer of earth, whispers the same refrain. What we call myth may be the fossil of lived experience. The Great Flood of Mesopotamia is both story and riddle, echoing through scripture, legend, and science. It may never resolve into a single event. Instead, it remains an unresolved chord, part geological memory, part spiritual vision, part echo of a world perpetually vulnerable to the tides of change. And as with all such tales, its waters flow outward, connecting Mesopotamia to flood myths across the globe. From the sinking of Atlantis to the drowning of lands in India, China, and the Americas. Perhaps these are not separate stories at all, but variations of a single refrain, humanity's oldest memory of survival against the rising sea. Chapter 17. The Ice Age. Cave paintings of Lascaux beneath the rolling hills of southwestern France, hidden for millennia in the dark silence of limestone chambers, lies one of humanity's most haunting legacies. The caves of Lascaux, discovered by chance in 1940, open a doorway into the Ice Age mind. On their walls, in pigments that have endured more than 17,000 years, Paleolithic artists painted horses, bison, aurochs, deer, ibex, and the strange, dreamlike figures that still ignite wonder today. Step by step, as torchlight flickers against stone, one feels less in a cave and more in a sanctuary, an ancient cathedral, where humanity's first stories were written not in words, but in images. The Lascaux paintings belong to the Upper Paleolithic period, specifically the Magdalenian culture, a time when Europe was still shaped by ice sheets, harsh winters, and herds of great mammals that roamed the plains. To survive required not only skill with stone tools and hunting strategies, but also a deep relationship with the natural world. It is here, in the flickering light of fire, that art seems to have been born as something more than decoration. Art as memory, ritual, and perhaps even a form of survival. What strikes modern viewers first is the vitality of the images. Horses gallop in motion, horns curve with careful perspective. Bison strain against the ground as if the artist had captured their power mid-stride. Unlike simple outlines, the Lascaux artists use shading, engraving, and natural contours of the cave to give depth, as though the rock itself was alive. In places, a single wall may contain dozens of overlapping figures, painted across centuries, creating a palimpsest of visions that speaks of continuity, of traditions passed down through generations in ritual gatherings within these subterranean halls. Yet these images are not random. They are clustered, repeated, and arranged with care. In the famous Hall of the Bulls, massive aurochs dominate the space, flanked by horses and deer. Some animals face each other, as if engaged in a silent confrontation. Others overlap, forming patterns of movement that suggest stories once told by hunters gathered around the flicker of flame. Scholars have long debated their purpose. Were they expressions of hunting magic intended to summon success in the pursuit of game? Were they symbolic, encoding lessons about migration routes, mating seasons, or the dangers of particular prey? Or were they something even more profound? A kind of early cosmology, binding the human community to the greater cycles of earth and sky. A particularly tantalizing hypothesis is that some of the paintings encode astronomical knowledge. Researchers have noted that clusters of dots near certain animal figures seem to correspond to star patterns visible in the Ice Age sky. For instance, a group of dots near a bull figure has been compared to the Pleiades star cluster, which today rests in the constellation Taurus. If true, this would suggest that Paleolithic people were not only observers of the hunt, but also of the heavens, that they tracked the rhythms of the stars as markers of migration, season, and survival. Yet certainty eludes us. The dots may be stars, or they may be something entirely different. Tallies, wounds, or abstract marks of meaning long forgotten. Other images deepen the enigma. In one chamber lies the so-called shaft scene, where a human figure appears, rare in Paleolithic art. The man is drawn simply, almost crudely, with arms outstretched, falling backward before a wounded bison. At his side lies a bird on a staff, an object whose meaning remains unknown. Here, unlike the vibrant herds, is a scene of drama, death, and mystery. Some see it as a hunting accident, others as a myth preserved in symbolic form. Still others interpret it as shamanic, a vision of ritual transformation, where human and animal worlds collide. The preservation of these paintings is itself remarkable. For tens of thousands of years, the caves remained sealed, their climate stable, their air still, protecting the pigments of ochre, charcoal, and manganese. Only the accidental discovery by 4 boys and a dog in 1940 brought Lascaux back into human awareness. In the decades that followed, the caves became a site of pilgrimage for scholars, artists, and travelers. But human presence also brought danger. The breath of visitors, the heat of lamps, and the spread of microorganisms began to damage the fragile images. By the 1960s, mold and algae threatened to obscure what had lasted for ages. Today, the original caves are closed to the public, their paintings carefully monitored, while replicas allow visitors to glimpse what the ancients left behind. Yet even in replica, the impact is undeniable. To stand before the painted walls of Lascaux, even reconstructed, is to feel the pulse of something that transcends time. These were not casual sketches, not idle decoration of idle hours. They were, in some sense, necessary. In their repetition, in their careful rendering, they suggest ritual acts, perhaps initiation rites, perhaps seasonal ceremonies, perhaps the invocation of forces beyond the human. The cave was not only a shelter, but a canvas of the sacred. Comparisons to other Paleolithic sites strengthen this impression. From the caves of Chauvet, with its lions and rhinoceroses dating back 30,000 years, to Altamira in Spain, where bison seem to rise from the ceiling. The tradition of cave art spans continents and millennia. In each, the choice of deep, hidden spaces suggests that these works were not for daily viewing, but for moments of gravity, journeys into darkness, guided by torchlight, where images emerged as revelations. And still questions remain. Why animals, so consistently, and so rarely humans? Why the focus on movement, on vitality, on the great beasts of the hunt? Were these paintings offerings, dialogues with spirits, or lessons passed from elder to youth? Could they be records of climatic shifts, of the encroaching ice, of the struggle between life and death in a world of uncertainty? We cannot say. The artists left no words, only images, and those images speak in a language that is half familiar, half forgotten. What we do know is that beneath the earth, in silence and shadow, our ancestors created a bridge across time. In the brushstrokes of ochre and charcoal, we glimpse their hands, their eyes, their thoughts reaching outward. They lived in a world colder, harsher, and more precarious than our own. Yet they found the will to create beauty, to tell stories, to preserve memory not in speech but in stone. As we look upon the paintings of Lascaux, we find ourselves in dialogue with the deep past. Their purpose may elude us, their meanings remain debated, but their presence is undeniable. They remind us that even in the depths of the Ice Age, humanity sought not only to survive, but to understand, to connect, and to leave behind a trace of spirit. The caves hold no final answers, only echoes. And perhaps it is in those echoes, resonant, mysterious, enduring, that we hear the first whispers of who we are. Chapter 18. The buried city of Pavlopetri. Greece, beneath the turquoise waters off the southern coast of Laconia, Greece, lies a city lost to time, Pavlopetri. Its name today comes from a nearby islet, but its true name, what its inhabitants once called it, has been forgotten. What remains is stone, geometry, and silence. A city beneath the sea, older than legend, older even than much of what we think of as Greek civilization. Discovered in 1967 by Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer, Pavlopetri astonished archaeologists. Just meters below the surface, clearly visible through the crystalline waters, were the unmistakable traces of a planned settlement. Streets intersecting at right angles, buildings arranged in blocks, open courtyards, and what may have been a central square. Unlike other ruins claimed by waves and time, this was no scattered heap of rubble. It was a city. Still whole, still speaking across 5,000 years. When researchers from the University of Cambridge mapped the site in 1968, they realized its extraordinary age. The stone foundations date to the Bronze Age, around 2800 BCE, making Pavlopetri one of the oldest known submerged cities on Earth. Long before classical Athens or the Golden Age of Sparta, long before Homer sang of Troy, people walked the streets of this place. Here, families gathered in courtyards, artisans worked their trades, and merchants may have loaded ships for voyages across the Aegean. The preservation is uncanny. Normally, the sea wears away all trace of habitation, scattering stones and erasing order. Yet in Pavlopetri, the plan of the city remains intact. Entire blocks can be traced, with houses measuring 10 to 12 meters, aligned along narrow streets. Archaeologists have even identified what may have been a system of larger avenues, suggesting an organized urban design far ahead of its time. But why did the city fall beneath the sea? Some argue that tectonic activity was to blame. Greece lies in a restless zone, where the African and Eurasian plates grind against each other. Earthquakes have reshaped its shores for millennia. A sudden shift in the land could have dropped Pavlopetri beneath the waters, sealing its fate in a single night. Others point to gradual sea level rise. Over the last several thousand years, as the Ice Age glaciers melted and coastlines shifted, many settlements close to the shore would have found themselves increasingly vulnerable. Pavlopetri may not have been destroyed in an instant, but slowly surrendered, inch by inch, until the tide claimed its streets forever. Still others imagine a more catastrophic origin, perhaps a tsunami, like the one unleashed by the eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE, swept the coast and buried the city under the sea. The Aegean world is no stranger to disaster, and myths of drowned lands echo in its traditions. The site remained almost untouched for decades, visited by divers but largely unexplored. Then, in 2009, a new survey began, led by John Henderson of the University of Nottingham and Elpida Hajidaki, a Greek archaeologist. Using advanced sonar mapping and digital reconstruction, the team revealed the city in unprecedented detail. They discovered over 30 buildings measuring between 60 and 100 meters across, and evidence of a complex layout with distinct zones for different purposes. Pottery found at the site connects Pavlopetri to the Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations, two of the most storied cultures of the Bronze Age. This suggests that the city may have been part of a thriving network of trade, linking Crete, the Peloponnese, and perhaps even lands beyond the Aegean. To imagine Pavlopetri bustling with seafarers, markets, and ritual life is to glimpse a world now hushed beneath the waves. The preservation of Pavlopetri fuels speculation of what else might lie hidden along the continental shelves. For most of human history, civilizations grew near water, rivers, deltas, coastlines. But as seas rose after the last ice age, countless settlements were swallowed. Pavlopetri is only one example, unusually visible in shallow, clear waters. Elsewhere, whole cities may lie buried, unseen, under meters of silt and salt. Could these lost settlements hold answers to questions about humanity's forgotten past? The dating of Pavlopetri places it near the dawn of complex societies in Europe. Its existence challenges assumptions about when and where urban life began. It shows that even before the height of Minoan Crete, even before the palaces of Mycenae, organized, permanent cities dotted the Aegean shores. Yet the sea has hidden their stories. Standing on the modern coast, the surface of the water looks unbroken, timeless. But beneath lies a reminder that landscapes are never fixed. Where tourists swim and fishermen cast their nets, there was once stone and fire, voices and footsteps, lives as real as our own. Pavlopetri's submerged streets stretch like a mirror of our present, a reminder that all cities, ours included, may one day lie beneath the waters of time. For the archaeologist, Pavlopetri is not just a city but a promise that other such sites exist, waiting, buried under the sea. Already sonar has revealed anomalies in many parts of the world, structures off the coast of India, in the waters of Japan, and elsewhere in the Mediterranean. Some are natural, some are uncertain, but others, like Pavlopetri, speak too clearly of human hands. The sea is a keeper of secrets. It buries, but it also preserves. As divers swim above Pavlopetri, the streets below remain still, untroubled by time. The houses, the courtyards, the avenues, they form a silent city, one that resists erasure. And in its endurance, it suggests a haunting possibility. That what we know of history is only a fragment, the tip of a vast sunken continent of memory. Pavlopetri whispers not only of its own people, but of many others. Communities erased by shifting earth and rising waters, stories lost to silence. It asks a question that lingers long after one surfaces from its depths. How much of our past remains hidden, drowned just beyond sight? Chapter 19, The Sphinx and Water Erosion. Debate at the edge of the Giza Plateau, where desert winds sweep across the limestone bedrock and pyramids rise against the horizon, rests a monument both familiar and unknowable. The Great Sphinx, half lion and half man, gazes eastward toward the rising sun. Carved directly from the bedrock of the plateau, its silent face has endured sandstorms, invasions, and the slow erosion of time. It is one of the most iconic relics of ancient Egypt, and yet it may also be the most misunderstood. For beneath its weathered surface lies a question that unsettles the foundations of accepted history. How old is the Sphinx truly? Mainstream Egyptology situates the carving of the Sphinx within the Old Kingdom, around 2500 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. This dating is based largely on context, the proximity of the Sphinx to Khafre's pyramid and valley temple, as well as the resemblance of the Sphinx's facial features to statues attributed to him. For decades, this explanation held sway, providing a neat placement of the monument within the grand arc of Egyptian civilization. But the stones themselves may tell a different story, one older, stranger, and more difficult to reconcile. In the early 1990s, geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University advanced a radical thesis. Examining the body of the Sphinx and its surrounding enclosure, he noted deep vertical fissures and undulating weathering patterns. To his trained eye, these patterns were not the result of wind and sand erosion, as conventionally believed, but of prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall. Egypt's arid climate, Schoch argued, had not produced sufficient rainfall to account for such erosion over the past 5,000 years. Instead, he proposed that the Sphinx must have been carved during a much earlier epoch, when the Sahara was lush and monsoon rains drenched the landscape, perhaps as early as 7000 BCE, or even before. This claim, if true, would upend the timeline of civilization itself. At that distant date, mainstream archaeology holds that Egypt was inhabited by Neolithic peoples, subsisting through pastoralism and early farming. No dynasties, no pyramids, no monumental stone carving. Yet the weathering on the Sphinx suggested to Schoch a far older origin, implying that either an unknown culture of great sophistication once flourished here, or that we must entirely rethink the trajectory of human development. The idea did not emerge from geology alone. In the 1970s, French researcher R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch had first noted the unusual erosion on the Sphinx enclosure, suggesting water as the culprit. His observations lingered on the margins of Egyptology until Schoch, bringing scientific credentials, gave them sharper form. The debate quickly polarized. On one side stood geologists and independent researchers who found Schoch's case compelling. On the other, Egyptologists insisted that the evidence for Khafra's authorship remained strong, and that the erosion could be explained by other factors, such as rising and falling water tables, or localized weather effects. To walk within the Sphinx enclosure today is to feel the weight of the debate etched into stone. The walls surrounding the monument are deeply grooved, with channels that run vertically, as if rain once poured over them for centuries. The head of the Sphinx, less eroded, rises above, perhaps the product of restoration or recarving at a later date. The juxtaposition of body and head, of deeply weathered stone against smoother surfaces, has fueled speculation that the Sphinx may indeed have been far older, its body carved in deep antiquity, its head reshaped during dynastic times to resemble a pharaoh. Critics, however, remain steadfast. They point out that no inscription, no text, no unequivocal record speaks of the Sphinx before the Old Kingdom. The temples adjacent to the monument, built from massive limestone blocks cut from its enclosure, show architectural styles consistent with the 4th dynasty. And the resemblance between the Sphinx's visage and statues of Khafra, though debated, continues to serve as a key pillar of the orthodox interpretation. Egyptologists argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that until inscriptions or datable artifacts are discovered, the case for an older Sphinx remains speculative. Yet the questions do not fade. If Schoch's water erosion hypothesis is correct, then the Sphinx may be thousands of years older than Khafra, carved in a time when Egypt was green, fertile, and unrecognizable compared to the desert we know today. Who then carved it? What culture possessed the skill to quarry and shape such a colossal form from living rock, centuries before dynastic Egypt? Was it the ancestors of the Egyptians, preserving a memory of the lion as a guardian of sacred ground? Or could it have been the work of a forgotten people, their achievements lost to flood, sand, and time? The symbolism of the Sphinx itself deepens the mystery. The lion, a universal image of strength and guardianship, may have held cosmological meaning. Some researchers, including John Anthony West, linked the Sphinx to the constellation Leo, suggesting that its alignment with the rising sun at the spring equinox might date back to a time when Leo dominated the dawn sky, around 10,500 BCE. This Orion correlation theory, tied also to the layout of the pyramids, has captured the imagination of many, though mainstream astronomy and archaeology regard it as speculative. Still, the idea of the Sphinx as a marker of cosmic cycles resonates with the deep time suggested by Schoch's geology. Even if we set aside astronomical alignments, the Sphinx endures as a puzzle. Restoration records from ancient Egypt show that pharaohs as late as the New Kingdom undertook repairs on the monument, clearing away sand and rebuilding its body. To them, the Sphinx was already ancient, a relic from a past shrouded in myth. Inscriptions from the time of Thutmose IV describe a dream in which the Sphinx promised the prince kingship if he freed it from the desert sands. Such records tell us that even the Egyptians of 1400 BCE regarded the Sphinx as a monument from a deeper antiquity, its origins forgotten or mythologized. Today, modern technology continues to probe the Sphinx for answers. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have suggested anomalies beneath the enclosure, possible cavities or chambers yet unexplored. Some have speculated these may be repositories of records, echoing the legendary Hall of Records spoken of in esoteric traditions. To date, no such chamber has been excavated or confirmed, but the possibility lingers, fueling imaginations and further entwining fact with legend. The Sphinx, then, is not merely a monument of stone. It is a canvas upon which generations project their questions about human origins, forgotten knowledge, and the fragility of history itself. Whether carved in Khafra's reign or in a prehistoric age of rains, it embodies the tension between orthodoxy and anomaly, between what we can prove and what we can only wonder. As the sun rises over the Giza Plateau, the Sphinx gazes eastward as it has for thousands of years. Its face, weathered yet resolute, holds its secrets close. Was it born of dynastic ambition, or of an older memory, carried from a time before deserts, before pyramids, perhaps even before the civilizations we recognize as the first? We cannot yet say. The stone erodes, debates rage, and the silence of ages endures. And in that silence, the Sphinx waits, an eternal guardian, carved at the threshold of history, keeping watch over mysteries we may never fully uncover. Chapter 20. The frozen mammoths of Siberia. In the endless expanse of Siberia, where the ground itself remains locked in frost for most of the year, a strange and haunting archive has endured. It is not written on tablets of stone or carved upon temple walls, but sealed in ice. Here, in the frozen earth, the remains of creatures from a vanished world wait, astonishingly intact. Among them, the mammoth, giant of the Ice Age, wrapped still in skin and fur, its story entombed in the permafrost. The discovery of these frozen giants has puzzled humanity for centuries. Hunters wandering the tundra would sometimes find immense carcasses protruding from riverbanks, their flesh still red, their hair matted with ice. For the indigenous peoples of Siberia, these beings were not relics of the past, but living forces of the underworld. Legends spoke of them as creatures that tunneled beneath the ground, dying only when exposed to sunlight. It was not until the modern age that science could approach them as remnants of a prehistoric time. Yet even today, their preservation raises unsettling questions. The first well-documented discovery of a frozen mammoth occurred in 1799, when a hunter named Osip Shumakov stumbled upon a carcass eroding from the banks of the Lena River. The body was nearly whole. Flesh, tusks, and even long strands of reddish-brown hair. Word spread, and by 1806, the remains had been recovered and sent to St. Petersburg, where they astonished European scholars. Unlike fossilized bones, this was a creature that still bore the marks of life, as though it had been frozen in the very moment of its death. Over the centuries, more have emerged. Entire mammoths, calves, and adults alike, entombed in ice with startling detail preserved. In some, the contents of the stomach remained intact, revealing the grasses and flowers they had been eating just hours before. These were not creatures slowly buried and fossilized over millennia. They were, it seemed, flash-frozen, caught in a sudden grip of death and cold. The question is, how? The mammoth lived during the Pleistocene, a period of repeated ice ages stretching back some 2.6 million years. They thrived across Eurasia and North America, coexisting with early humans who hunted them for meat, bone, and ivory. Yet around 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, they began to vanish. Climate change and human hunting both played roles, but the frozen carcasses hint at something far more abrupt. A calamity that seized individuals and locked them instantly in permafrost. Some scientists suggest that sudden landslides or mudflows in periglacial environments buried them quickly, preserving their flesh. Others point to collapsing riverbanks, where animals may have drowned and been sealed in sediment and ice. But these explanations do not account for the sheer number of mammoths found with such unusual completeness. A more controversial theory looks to the sky. Could these animals have been victims of rapid climatic upheaval triggered by cosmic events, asteroid impacts, sudden shifts in Earth's axis, or bursts of solar activity? The Younger Dryas period, around 12,900 years ago, saw dramatic temperature swings that reshaped ecosystems overnight. If such shifts were violent enough, might they have created conditions for near-instant freezing? The mystery deepens when we look at the details. In some mammoths, broken bones and twisted limbs suggest a violent end, as though they had been thrown by a powerful force. In others, the stomach contents include plants that should not have been available in freezing climates, hinting at a sudden transition from warmth to cold. In one famous specimen, the Berezovka mammoth discovered in 1901, remains of buttercups and grasses were found between its teeth, plants of a temperate meadow, arrested mid-meal by death. What catastrophe was swift enough to kill, bury, and preserve these giants? Was it local or global? The mammoths are not alone. Alongside them, in the permafrost, lie woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, and bison, many preserved with flesh still intact. These animals paint a picture of a rich Ice Age steppe, a world of wide grasslands and immense herds stretching across northern Eurasia. It was a fertile world, one that sustained both beasts and humans for millennia. Its sudden collapse remains one of prehistory's most haunting enigmas. For humans, the mammoth was more than prey. It was a provider of survival. Archaeological sites across Europe and Siberia reveal mammoth bones used as the frameworks of huts, their tusks carved into tools and art, their images etched on cave walls. To see their bodies emerge from the ice is to see the very creatures that shaped human endurance in the Ice Age. Their extinction was not only a loss to nature, but a rupture in the bond between humans and their environment. Today, the frozen mammoths are yielding new secrets. Advances in genetics have allowed scientists to extract DNA from their remains, mapping the genome of these vanished giants. There are even projects underway to revive the mammoth, blending its genes with those of modern elephants to create hybrids. For some, this is a step toward restoring lost ecosystems. For others, it is an unsettling attempt to turn prehistory into experiment. But the preservation of mammoths is not merely a scientific puzzle. It is also a warning. Their sudden deaths remind us of the fragility of life in the face of environmental upheaval. If great herds could be erased in moments, what of us? Do their bodies, locked in ice, carry a message across millennia? A testimony that worlds can vanish overnight? In Siberia's thawing permafrost, more mammoths continue to emerge. As the climate warms, the ground releases what it has held for thousands of years. Hunters still find tusks rising from riverbanks, and sometimes whole bodies. With each discovery, the past surfaces again, silent yet eloquent. The mammoths sleep no longer. Their presence unsettles, not only because of their size or their preservation, but because they are reminders of catastrophe, messengers from a world undone by forces we barely comprehend. They stand at the threshold between myth and science, between memory and erasure. Were they merely victims of natural cycles, or witnesses to a cataclysm that reshaped the earth and erased forgotten chapters of human story? The ice keeps its counsel, and as long as these frozen giants continue to emerge from the permafrost, the questions they carry will follow us, heavy, unresolved, and cold as the silence of Siberia itself. Chapter 21. The Submerged Temples of Mahabalipuram. The southeastern coast of India, where the Bay of Bengal meets the land in restless waves, rises the ancient town of Mahabalipuram. Known today for its intricate rock-cut shrines and monolithic temples, the place is steeped in legends that reach far beyond what stands upon the shore. For centuries, sailors told stories of a line of 7 magnificent pagodas that once shone like jewels along this coast, guiding mariners and honoring the gods. Today, only one of those temples, the shore temple, remains visible. The others, it is said, were swallowed by the sea. The myth of the 7 pagodas has lingered in memory for generations. Early European travelers of the 13th and 14th centuries spoke of ruins glimpsed offshore, sometimes visible at low tide. The Portuguese chronicler Duarte Barbosa, writing in the 16th century, noted the grandeur of Mahabalipuram and the tradition that the sea had claimed most of its temples. These accounts blended with local Tamil traditions, which told of divine wrath and drowned sanctuaries. But for centuries the legend remained exactly that, a tale, half believed, half dismissed, with no firm evidence resting upon the waves. The shore temple itself, constructed in the 7th and 8th centuries during the Pallava dynasty, stands as a sentinel of what might once have been a far grander complex. Built of granite blocks and aligned to the rising sun, it is among the earliest examples of structural temples in South India. Its twin shrines, one dedicated to Shiva and the other to Vishnu, bear the weathering of centuries of salt and storm. Even standing alone, the shore temple evokes the sense of an unfinished story, a fragment of something once greater. For the people of Mahabalipuram, that unfinished story became a living reality on December 26, 2004. On that day, one of the deadliest tsunamis in recorded history struck the Indian Ocean coasts. In the moments before the colossal wave arrived, the sea retreated dramatically, exposing stretches of seabed that are never normally visible. Local fishermen and villagers looked on in awe and fear as, for a few minutes, the ocean revealed stone walls, carved blocks, and the outlines of structures long buried beneath the sand and waves. Then, with terrifying force, the water surged back, covering the vision and leaving behind devastation. When the waters receded in the aftermath of the tsunami, archaeologists rushed to the site. The event had stripped away layers of sand and sediment, revealing remnants that corroborated what legend had long suggested. Underwater surveys conducted in the years that followed identified stone formations, walls, and potential foundations lying just offshore, some aligned with the surviving shore temple. The Archaeological Survey of India, along with marine archaeologists from institutions such as the National Institute of Oceanography, documented these finds carefully, noting their similarity in style and construction to Pallava-era monuments on land. Divers exploring the offshore sites reported large stone blocks arranged in patterns suggestive of human design. Some sections appeared to form steps or platforms, others the bases of what might once have been temple walls. Though much eroded by the sea, their presence supported the notion that the shore temple was indeed only a surviving part of a once larger complex. Radiocarbon dating and stylistic comparisons suggest these submerged remains belong to the same Pallava period as the surviving structures, roughly the 7th and 8th centuries CE. Yet the allure of Mahabalipuram lies not only in what is known, but in what is possible. Some researchers point out that sea levels have not remained constant. Over the past 10,000 years, since the end of the last ice age, global seas have risen by more than 120 meters, submerging vast tracts of coastal land once inhabited by ancient peoples. In India, as along many coasts of the world, traditions of drowned cities and sunken temples echo across time. Could it be that the 7 pagodas are not merely Pallava-era monuments, but remnants of older sanctuaries built in epochs when the shoreline stretched further out to sea? Local legend weaves deeper myths. One tale tells of a proud king, Hiranyakasipu, who defied the gods with his arrogance. In anger, the gods unleashed the sea, which swallowed his city, sparing only one temple as a warning. Such stories, while cast in mythic tones, may preserve faint memories of actual catastrophes, storms, tsunamis, or the slow encroachment of the sea upon once sacred ground. In this way, myth and geology entwine, offering not certainty but possibility. Modern marine archaeology at Mahabalipuram is cautious. The underwater remains are difficult to access, their shapes blurred by centuries of erosion. Some features may be natural formations mistaken for architecture, while others, beyond doubt, show the hand of human carving. The line between myth and evidence is thin, and researchers walk it carefully. Still, the very existence of these finds confirms that the legend of the 7 pagodas was not entirely a sailor's fancy. At least some of the temples did indeed stand where the ocean now lies. To stand before the shore temple today, with the endless sea stretching behind it, is to feel both awe and loss. The temple itself is battered, its carvings softened by salt and storm, yet it endures as though to mark the place where its vanished siblings once stood. Tourists who wander the temple grounds often hear the story of the drowned pagodas, and for many, the legend deepens the experience, transforming the landscape into a threshold between history and myth. But the story of Mahabalipuram is not just one of loss. It is also a story of memory preserved. The legends carried by Tamil storytellers, repeated by sailors, and recorded by chroniclers across centuries, kept alive the possibility that something lay beneath the waves. When the tsunami of 2004 briefly revealed the truth, it was as though memory itself had surfaced, however briefly, to vindicate the whispers of the past. And still, questions remain. How many temples once stood along this coast? Were they truly 7, as the legend claims, or more, or less? Did they belong solely to the Pallava kings? Or do they hint at structures raised in earlier, forgotten ages, before the rise of dynasties? How many other temples, cities, and sanctuaries lie beneath the seas of India, waiting for accident or patient exploration to bring them once more to light? The ocean, vast and indifferent, keeps its secrets well. The shore temple, rising defiantly against the surf, is a reminder that not all was lost, and that every legend may contain a shard of truth. In the quiet rhythm of the waves, the drowned temples of Mahabalipuram remain hidden, their silence part of the mystery that has always bound humanity to the sea. For those who look upon this coast, the story is not finished. The ocean may one day give up more of its secrets, or it may guard them forever. And in the tension between what has been revealed and what is still concealed, the legend of the 7 pagodas continues to live, half history, half myth, echoing across the restless waters of time. Chapter 22. The Oera. Linda Book in the mid-19th century, in the quiet northern provinces of the Netherlands, a strange manuscript surfaced. It was a thick volume, written in an unfamiliar script, its pages yellowed but intact. Those who first examined it claimed it was a chronicle, preserved through the centuries by Frisian families, a record of an ancient northern civilization, their customs, their gods, and, most hauntingly, their destruction in a great flood around 2193 BCE. This was the Oera Linda book. From the moment it appeared, controversy surrounded it. Was it genuine, an echo of forgotten history, or was it an elaborate fabrication, born of romantic nationalism and the spirit of the age? The debates it sparked would endure for decades, and even now, the book lingers in the shadows between myth and memory, hoax and hidden truth. The manuscript was first presented to the world in 1867, when Cornelis over de Linden, a shipwright from the Frisian town of Den Helder, produced it. He claimed it had been passed down in his family for generations. The book was written in a script resembling Old Frisian, though unfamiliar in many respects, and it purported to be a chronicle stretching back thousands of years. Within its pages, readers encountered a sweeping story of a northern people. It described their matriarchal society, where priestesses of the goddess Freya kept sacred watch over the people. It told of migrations, wars, and encounters with distant cultures, including the Greeks and Phoenicians. Most striking of all, it spoke of a flood, a sudden cataclysm that swept away a great northern land, drowning cities and scattering survivors. The date given was precise, 2193 BCE. For scholars of the 19th century, the book's claims were electrifying. If true, it suggested the survival of a hidden European tradition as old as Sumer or Egypt. Some even speculated that the lost northern land might be linked to Plato's Atlantis or to biblical flood traditions. In an era fascinated by national origins and ancient myths, the Oera Linda book seemed to offer a missing piece of the puzzle. But skepticism soon grew. Linguists examined the text and declared the language an artificial construction, mixing elements of genuine Old Frisian with modern invention. The style, they said, was inconsistent with authentic ancient manuscripts. By the early 20th century, many had concluded it was a forgery, likely created in the 1800s, perhaps even by Over de Linden himself or his acquaintances. Yet dismissal did not erase the allure of its narrative. At the heart of the Oera Linda book lies the flood. Its description resonates with familiar themes: divine displeasure, cosmic upheaval, and the erasure of civilizations. It tells of Freya's people watching their lands sink beneath the sea, of temples collapsing, and of survivors scattering across Europe and the Mediterranean. Whether authentic or not, such imagery strikes a deep chord. Flood myths are among the oldest stories humanity has carried. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia, to the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha in Greece, to the biblical account of Noah, cultures across the world remember waters that rose and reshaped the earth. Could the Oera Linda book, even if born of invention, have drawn on fragments of oral memory, echoes of real disasters passed down for millennia? Geology reminds us that northern Europe was not spared upheaval. Around 6200 BCE, the Storegga Slide off the coast of Norway unleashed tsunamis across the North Sea, drowning coasts and perhaps severing Britain from the continent. Later, in the Bronze Age, shifting seas and storms reshaped low-lying regions, erasing settlements and salt marshes alike. For those who lived on the edge of land and water, the sea was both a source of life and an ever-present threat. The year 2193 BCE carries no clear geological marker, yet it falls within a turbulent era. Across the Near East, civilizations faltered around the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, with drought, invasions, and collapse sweeping through Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. To imagine that Europe too faced upheaval is not implausible. Even if the book is false, its choice of date hints at the human awareness that catastrophes often strike not in isolation, but across continents. The cultural afterlife of the Ora Linda book is as fascinating as its content. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, nationalist movements seized upon it as proof of ancient northern greatness. Some extremist ideologies twisted its myths to serve their own ends, reading into it claims of racial superiority and lost golden ages. Such appropriations cast a shadow over the manuscript, further undermining its credibility in academic circles. Yet, outside of ideology, the book continues to haunt. Its imagery of priestesses, lost lands, and flood-borne migrations feels archetypal, tapping into patterns of myth that recur again and again across time. For the seeker of hidden histories, the question lingers: could even a hoax bear within it fragments of deeper truth? Today, most historians and linguists remain firm in their verdict. The Ora Linda book is not an ancient chronicle, but a 19th century creation. Yet certainty does not end the story. For beneath the layers of fabrication, one can sense the weight of memory, cultural memory, shaped by landscapes where the sea forever threatened, where floods could erase villages in a single night. And so, the book serves as more than forgery or fiction. It stands as testament to humanity's enduring obsession with the flood. Whether in Mesopotamia, the Mediterranean, or the North Sea, we return always to the same image: waters rising, sweeping away all that was known, leaving only fragments for survivors to carry into legend. The Ora Linda book may never be what it claimed to be. Yet in its blurred lines between history and invention, it mirrors the way memory itself survives. Fractured, reimagined, and carried across centuries. Somewhere between hoax and heritage, it reminds us that the boundary between myth and history is never fixed. And perhaps within its disputed pages lies a reflection, not of one lost land, but of countless drowned worlds that haunt the edges of our past. Chapter 23. The buried secrets of Nan Madol. Out in the Pacific Ocean, on the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia, lies a place unlike any other. Rising from a shallow lagoon, its walls of black basalt stand silent, laced with coral and the slow encroachment of mangrove roots. Nan Madol, the Venice of the Pacific, is a city of stone built atop nearly 100 artificial islets, each connected by tidal channels that once carried canoes between them. For centuries, the ruins have inspired awe, fear, and speculation. They are a reminder that even in the remotest reaches of the ocean, human hands once shaped monuments of staggering ambition. Yet the city's origins, its sudden decline, and the secrets it still keeps remain shrouded in mystery. Archaeologists describe Nan Madol as a ceremonial and political center of the Saudeleur dynasty, which flourished from about the 12th to the 16th centuries. The builders stacked immense prismatic columns of basalt, quarried from distant flows and transported across difficult terrain. Some blocks weigh several tons, and yet they were arranged in neat, interlocking layers, creating towering walls, tombs, and enclosures. The scale is not as vast as the pyramids of Giza or the stone circles of Britain, but its context makes it no less astonishing. A megalithic city built on water, far from the great civilizations of the ancient world. Nan Madol was not simply a settlement. It was a ritual landscape, a place designed to control both people and memory. Oral histories describe it as the seat of the Saudeleur rulers, who demanded tribute and centralized power in ways that reshaped island life. The sacred islets were dedicated to different purposes: ritual, residence, burial. The largest, called Nan Dawas, contained the royal tombs, massive walls enclosing spaces where the dead were laid to rest in coral-filled crypts. The very construction of these spaces signaled authority, power inscribed into stone, visible to all who approached by sea. And yet, despite the impressive remains, much about Nan Madol resists explanation. How were the basalt columns moved across swamps and reefs without draft animals, wheels, or metal tools? Experimental reconstructions suggest ropes, rafts, and human coordination could suffice, but the sheer volume of stone, tens of thousands of tons, strains belief. Local legend offers another explanation. It is said that the first builders, two brothers named Olosopa and Olosipa, were sorcerers who called upon the spirits to raise the stones into place. Even today, whispers of supernatural power cling to the ruins. Many islanders consider Nan Madol haunted, a place not to be visited after dark. Legends also speak of the fall of the Sodeleur. Their centralized rule became oppressive, demanding heavy tribute and harsh obedience. At last, an outsider named Isokalekal is said to have arrived with followers, overthrowing the dynasty and establishing a new order. After that, Nan Madol declined, its stones slowly abandoned to mangroves and tides. Some versions of the story describe divine wrath or curses that accompanied its fall, as though the city itself carried within it the seeds of its undoing. Modern science suggests other possible reasons for its abandonment. The lagoon around Nan Madol is difficult to farm and sustain life. Its construction, while awe-inspiring, may have placed unsustainable burdens on food production and water supply. The centralized system of the Sodeleur might have faltered under ecological strain as much as political rebellion. Rising seas may also have played a role. Over the centuries, encroaching saltwater and changing coastlines eroded the very foundations of the artificial islets, making them less habitable. As with many other sites across the world, the ocean seems both giver and taker. It provided the setting for magnificence, but it also slowly claimed it back. The mysteries of Nan Madol extend beyond its practical challenges. Carbon dating and archaeological surveys confirm its prominence in the late medieval period, but hints suggest deeper roots. Some islets may have been constructed centuries earlier, their earliest phases obscured by time. Were the Sodeleur the originators of the city, or inheritors of an even older tradition? Oral histories offer fragments that point further back, to unnamed peoples and forgotten practices. The absence of clear records leaves the door open to speculation. European explorers who first encountered Nan Madol in the 16th century were stunned by what they saw. The ruins seemed impossibly old, as though remnants of a lost age. Later colonial administrators, missionaries, and scholars added their own layers of myth, often framing Nan Madol as the Atlantis of the Pacific. Though the comparison is simplistic, it reflects the sense of dislocation that visitors felt when confronted with massive stone walls rising from a lagoon far removed from the monumental cultures of Eurasia. Even today, as archaeologists carefully map and study the site, Nan Madol defies full understanding. Its basalt walls conceal stories that no excavation has yet uncovered. Remote sensing reveals islets now submerged or heavily eroded, suggesting that much of the complex has already been lost to the sea. Each year, tides gnaw further at its edges, raising urgent questions about preservation and the fragility of memory written in stone. For those who listen to the voices of legend, Nan Madol carries darker secrets. Some believe it to be cursed, a place where the restless spirits of ancient rulers still linger. Others see it as a monument built with knowledge now forgotten. Perhaps even fragments of techniques passed down from cultures erased by floods long before the Sodeleur arrived. These interpretations, though speculative, align Nan Madol with other enigmatic sites around the world where myth and archaeology collide, and where the possibility of older hidden histories continues to stir the imagination. To stand in Nan Madol today is to feel the weight of silence. The basalt walls, softened by moss and sea spray, enclose spaces now filled with birdsong and the sound of waves lapping against coral. Canoes no longer glide through its canals, and no rulers demand tribute at its gates. What remains is both monument and mystery, a city built of stone upon water, left to slowly dissolve back into the lagoon that once sustained it. Was Nan Madol undone by human pride, by ecological limits, or by the slow encroachment of the sea? Was it truly the creation of a dynasty alone, or does it preserve whispers of an earlier, forgotten age? The answers remain elusive. Perhaps the ruins hold them still, locked within basalt walls and coral foundations, waiting for voices that can no longer be heard. As the tide rises and falls over the black stones, one truth endures. Nan Madol was not merely a city, but a story of power and ambition, of myth and memory, of humanity's eternal struggle to build against the shifting edge of the sea. And like so many of the world's great mysteries, its story remains unfinished, half buried beneath the waters, inviting us to wonder what else lies hidden, just beyond the reach of our sight. Chapter 24. The Endless Ice of Mystery. Reflections on the Pre-Flood World. The story of humanity is shadowed by water and ice. For more than 2 million years, vast glaciers carved the earth, advancing and retreating like the breath of a restless giant. They reshaped valleys, redirected rivers, and locked away oceans in frozen tombs. Then, in a span of centuries, perhaps even less, the ice withdrew, seas surged. The world was redrawn. It was in this time of change, at the end of the last ice age, that memory fractured. What one generation witnessed as disaster, another carried as story, and the next preserved as myth. These fragments of remembrance, scattered across cultures and continents, point to a deeper past. A past when the planet itself seemed unstable, when survival meant not just enduring the seasons, but surviving upheavals that broke the boundary between nature and catastrophe. Archaeology traces the outlines. Beneath Greenland's ice, a crater of unfathomable scale suggests the violence of a cosmic impact. In Turkey's hills, Göbekli Tepe rises with its enigmatic stones, older than agriculture, older than cities. In Antarctica, subglacial lakes and buried mountains speak of landscapes unseen for tens of millions of years. Across the Mediterranean, drowned coastlines conceal the remains of settlements swallowed as seas climbed meter after meter. Each discovery is a shard of memory, disconnected yet resonant. Myth gives them voice. From Mesopotamia's tablets comes the tale of a flood that erased kingdoms. From Greece, the memory of Deucalion and Pyrrha, survivors of divine wrath. From India, the story of Manu, who was warned of rising waters by a sacred fish. And from distant Pacific islands, chants of canoes bearing ancestors across endless seas after their homelands sank beneath the horizon. These stories are not the same, yet they circle the same truth. Water as destroyer, and memory as raft. The retreat of the glaciers was not gentle. Around 12,900 years ago, the Younger Dryas period brought sudden cold to a warming world, then ended with equally sudden heat. Temperatures shifted in decades, rivers swelled, and seas surged. At the edges of the great ice sheets, meltwater torrents carved canyons that still scar North America today. Some scientists wonder whether comet fragments or meteor impacts played a role in these events, striking the ice with such force that entire climates shifted. For those alive then, the changes would have seemed incomprehensible. Shores where villages stood were drowned in a generation, herds that once roamed vanished, forests spread where tundra had been, deserts bloomed where rivers dried. To live in that time was to watch the earth itself become unstable, its familiar rhythms broken. And yet, amidst this upheaval, humanity endured. The builders of Göbekli Tepe raised towering pillars, carved with foxes, vultures, and abstract signs. Their labor suggests not despair but renewal, a response to chaos with order, to destruction with creation. Were these stones an act of remembrance for a world lost to flood, or a monument to survival? We cannot know, but their presence whispers of people who carried memory not just in story, but in stone. In Siberia, mammoths fell and froze, their bodies preserved with the flowers of summer still in their mouths. Their deaths mark the violence of change, a suddenness that left no time for escape. Did humans watch them vanish and in that loss sense their own fragility? Did the sight of giants falling into silence shape the myths of monstrous beasts destroyed in primordial ages? As seas rose, coastlines shifted by hundreds of kilometers. Land once walked became seabed. The Black Sea may have been transformed by a catastrophic flood around 5600 BCE, when rising Mediterranean waters poured through the Bosporus. Off India's coast, sonar has revealed drowned structures near Dwarka, prompting speculation about submerged cities. In the Mediterranean, Pavlopetri rests beneath clear waters, its streets still mapped though its name is forgotten. Each of these is a testament. Not all memory is myth. Some remains are still there, waiting for eyes to find them. Yet the deeper we look, the less certain we become. Was there truly a golden civilization before the flood, as some suggest? Or were these fragments merely the resilience of small communities, enduring in the margins, then mythologized into grandeur by their descendants? The stones of Göbekli Tepe, the legends of Atlantis, the drowned temples of Malta, they may be monuments of flourishing or memorials of survival. The ice holds secrets still. In Antarctica, beneath kilometers of frozen weight, mountain ranges and valleys lie hidden. Some imagine lost worlds preserved there, landscapes untouched since before humans walked the earth. The Peary Race map, drawn in 1513, appears to show parts of Antarctica ice-free, challenging our assumptions about what was known and when. Whether misinterpretation or anomaly, it feeds the sense that the boundaries of our history are blurred, uncertain. Perhaps that is the truest reflection of the pre-flood world. Uncertainty. For those who lived then, the ground shifted, the seas advanced, and the sky may have burned. They did not have science to explain it, but they had story, and story, passed across generations, became myth. When we read these myths today, they are not simply tales of gods and heroes. They are echoes of survival. They carry, hidden within their verses, the memory of real events. Floods that swept away villages, storms that broke coasts, winters that lingered for decades. To dismiss them as fantasy is to overlook the resilience of memory, the way truth wears the mask of symbol when language falters. The pre-flood world, if it ever existed as a coherent reality, is not wholly lost. It lingers in fragments, in half-buried ruins, in ice cores drilled from polar caps, in the genetic memory of species that survived while others perished. It lingers in the stories humanity could not forget, even when clothed in myth. And so we stand at the threshold, looking back through fog and silence. Archaeology gives us glimpses. Myth gives us voice, but neither grants certainty. Were their civilizations erased in an instant, their memory surviving only as whispers of Atlantis? Or was it simply the endurance of scattered peoples, weaving catastrophe into the fabric of their stories? The endless ice remains. The seas that rose still cover the bones of worlds we may never see. But in the silence, the questions endure, pressing us not only to search the earth, but to search ourselves. Our hunger for origin, our fear of loss, our yearning for continuity. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the pre-flood world is not whether it existed, but why we continue to seek it. Why we look into the ruins and the drowned shores, asking what was forgotten. In that search, we confront our own fragility and our own hope, that even in loss, something endures. The ice does not answer. The seas do not speak, yet they hold the memory of worlds undone. And as long as they remain, so too will the questions, lingering, unresolved, inviting us to step deeper into the silence of the past.